that the way our audio system works is when I click on you and your sound starts, we will not be able to speak here. And then if I have a question, I'll interrupt you, and just keep in mind there might be a slight delay before your mic works. So thank you very much. And at this time, we'll turn it over to Christy.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me here and allowing me to be here via Zoom. Thank you for the committee. I'm from GoRail. Many of you know what GoRail is, but if not, I'd like to just let you know. We are a nonprofit group. We're based in DC, and our sole mission is to advocate for freight rail throughout the US. So I've met with many of you all. I've met with Seth Milliken before, and he's gone to DC with us to meet with legislators on behalf of freight rail and our issues. We work in conjunction with the Association of American Railroads. They're a large trade organization in DC on the Hill, and they really are the ones that do all the lobbying and work with the congressional offices. And what we at GoRail do is we're really just boots on the ground for them, and meet with elected officials throughout the country and let them know what's going on at the federal level. You all have folks down at the Capitol who will speak later from your class ones who let you know what's going on at the state level, but what we do is deal with federal. So just to give you a little background about what we do. Just a few little stats. I'm not going to load you all up with stats, but just to give you an overview of the freight rail network in the US. We've got 140,000 miles of freight rail in the entire US. And in Georgia, we've got 4,600 miles of rail with 28 railroads. A stat that we like to give folks to economically let everybody know where freight rail is and how it impacts your community. Everybody knows that it has an economic component, but in 2017, AAR commissioned a study through Towson University to actually be able to have a number to put with this when we're going out and talk to folks. And it's nice to actually have a number to give to folks. So the economic impact in 2017 was 1.1 million jobs that the freight rail network throughout the US produced. And it produced $219 billion in economic impact and output. So that's just a nice number to have and to give folks to let them know, hey, this is what we're doing throughout the entire 140,000 freight rail network miles in the US. One thing I want to talk to you about today is the Staggers Act. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with this, but this year is the 40th anniversary of the Staggers Act. This was a landmark legislation that was passed to partially privatize the freight rail industry. This was very important because before this happened, this is the 40th anniversary. This was signed into law in 1980 by Jimmy Carter. It was through bipartisan legislation, which is a feat in itself, as we see through some of the things that are going on today. So just the fact that we have a bipartisan and we have a Democrat also as a deregulator was excellent. But prior to 1980, before this happened, a lot of the railroads were in bankruptcy. They were controlled by the government. A lot of the infrastructure was crumbling, and the government had to step in because the freight rail network was just not producing, and they knew something had to happen. These things were it was dying on the vine. So they came in and they did something through the Staggers Act, a congressional act that had to partially deprivatize the industry. So what we have now is a thriving industry with the figures that I just gave you, with economic input for the country and for all the jobs that we produce. So 40 years strong now. We just celebrated the 40th anniversary. I'm not sure if any of you read any of the letters that we put out. Some of you on the committee actually signed the letter that we sent to Congress. We sent a letter to the Surface Transportation Board and to Congress to let them know, look, this is working. We've got 40 years of progress behind us. These are the economic numbers, and it's working very well for this to be a private industry. We had over 1,000 signers to this letter that just got sent up. So it was delivered to the Hill last week, and we actually had national op-ed that was sent out this week to, I believe it was InSources and up to the Hill newspaper. So that's gotten some good attention for the railroads this year. Just to remind everybody that this has worked and this is working, and to be able to have balanced regulation in the freight rail industry. So thanks to you all on the committee who signed that letter. I'm going to send that over to Madison so she can get it around to the committee if you all would like to take a look at the letter and see what it involved. So let's see. Oh, since 1980, I wanted to say there has been $710 billion that has been put back into the industry from into infrastructure and anything else that they would need, which ends up being 40 cents on the dollar. So it's very clear through how much we've been able to put back into the industry that clearly this is working. 40 years have gone by, and this landmark legislation really did work. So that's just a message we wanted to hammer home with maybe some not good pub that we've gotten in the last year or so, that this was a good thing that needs to continue. And, you know, some folks asked me when they got the letter, hey, what's the need for this? I get that it's the 40th anniversary, but why are we sending this up to the Hill? And that's a good question, besides just keeping a good positive spin on what the freight railroads do for everybody. But the reason that we did send it up is because there are proposals at the federal level that will affect the freight rail industry. And that's something that I wanted to talk to you about because you may not be aware of them. I'm not going to get down in the minutia of each proposal, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview so you'll know where this is coming from. So there was, yes, we wanted to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Staggers Act, but also we wanted to make sure, especially that the STB knew that we're still advocating to continue to have the regulation that we have on the industry as it is currently, and we don't want any more changes. So just to give you an overview, the Surface Transportation Board was reauthorized in a mandate from Congress in 2015. And what they're really supposed to do is just mediate rail disputes between customers in the freight rail industry if there's things that they can't work out on their own. So they're not really supposed to get involved individually with what rail rates are overall. It's just supposed to be a mediation and an arbitration, if you will, if there's an instance where they need to step in and get involved. This is a 5-member commission. And right now there's only 3 members on the board. And for a long time, we've only had 3 members. President Trump appointed 2 members. He appointed 1 member, and 1 member is waiting to be appointed. One's waiting to be confirmed, and 1 has not yet been appointed, but they have an idea of who it may be. So here we are at another presidential election, and we still don't have a full board of the Surface Transportation Board. So they're waiting to have these 2 other members confirmed by the Senate Commerce Committee. In the absence of that, they've been operating. Once they got the 3rd member, they've been operating with 3 members because they went for about 3 years with no work being done because they didn't have a full committee. As it is, they only have 5 members. So working with 3 is still, you know, they're still down 2 folks. So right now they're still waiting to see. We've been told that might happen this year. We're very skeptical of that because it's an election year. We don't think that's going to happen at all. So right now there's 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat on the commission, and there's 1 Democrat that has been proposed but has not been confirmed, and there's one Republican that's waiting to be confirmed. So we've been waiting for really about 2 years to have this full board put into place. So like I said, you know, when we hear that it might happen this year, we're not really thinking that that's going to happen, especially since you all know it's an election year. So one of the proposals that the Surface Transportation Board put out was at the end of the Obama administration in October of 2016. So this proposal has been hanging out there a long time. And basically what this would do is change up the way that our freight railroads are regulated. So what they want to do is get into the business of trying to decide rail rates. I mentioned that they were really supposed to be just mediating if there's a rate dispute or something like that. But what they want to do is try to decide rail rates and cap rail rates on certain commodities in certain areas. So obviously we see this as a huge problem in the industry because we are privately held. We have been privately held for 40 years, and we want to keep things the way that they are and keep this commission to its original intent that Congress had when it reauthorized it. So during this time, since there has been so much time that has gone by, we've been able to send letters to Congress, have op-eds. Many of you have made calls to your congressman or senator and let them know that, you know, this proposal should not move forward and these are the reasons why. So even though it's been hanging out there for a while, we have had some time to get our message out, including the final point on this letter that we just sent up to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Staggers Act. Just to mention on the rates, since that's really what they're trying to get involved with, since 1981, since the Staggers Act was implemented, rates are 40% lower than they were since 1981. So that's just a figure that we like to put out there to sort of reiterate our point that things are working very well, and you can definitely ship things by rail a lot cheaper and a lot more environmentally friendly. One other thing I wanted to mention is national funding. I know that you guys have things at the state level that you can do, but through a national funding, through the Federal Railroad Administration, this group is set to just check safety on the railroads. Of course, we're privately held, but that doesn't mean that we don't have standards that we have to meet. So through the Federal Railroad Administration, there are things that you can get for funding for your railroads. They work in conjunction with your state DOT. There's several grants that you can get. One of them is the Chrissy grant, which is obtained a lot and is a very popular grant. And mostly what they're in there for is for safety and upgrade and just any improvements that would be held on the rail line. So if you're looking for things like that to work with your DOT or work with local folks, those are there's grants that are available for national funding that you can be able to have to improve the railroads that are in your area. Another thing I want to talk to you about is technology. You know, a lot of people just think about railroads kind of maybe the way they were back in the 1800s when things were set up, but there's a lot of technology that has been put on the railroads in the last 10 years. One thing that we were mandated to do by Congress was to install something called positive train control. You all may have heard about this through a train accident that happened. This was sort of mandated through Congress because they are trying to prevent human error. And so this is sort of a backup to if there will be any kind of human error on the train. Positive train control is there, implemented on the train and also on the tracks and through radio, things that are on the tracks that can communicate so that if they would need to stop the train quickly, this would be something that could happen. And just be as a fail stop to the backup of the folks that are on the train. So this was mandated by Congress a few years ago. This year, by the end of 2020, all the Class 1 railroads have to have this implemented. And right now they're all on track to have this done. So this is good. We're meeting the mandate that Congress put forth. And this is just another safety measure that that shows that, you know, we're safer than we ever have been. So if you hear that word positive train control, that's all it is. It's a safety measure that has been a huge improvement for the railroads. However, they did have to spend an enormous cost, about $10 billion, to get this on all of the freight rail network throughout the country. Okay, just one more thing with technology I wanted to mention. The Association of American Railroads has an app that is for first responders. It's called Ask Rail. I mention this when I go and speak to my state legislators and local folks. It is an app for the first responders that they can have. It's a free app that they can download, and I can give them the information. It helps them to know in real time what's on the train, what's going through in the case of a rail emergency. So that's something that's just free to them. I like to mention it, especially to, like I said, our first responders when I go out, because that's something that they can have. And there's a few things they have to go through to fill out the form and prove that they're a first responder, but that's a good thing to know, especially if you're on your commission and speaking to other folks, your first responders in your area. And I'd be glad to get that information to them. It's a great thing to have in their toolbox. So that's all I've got for right now. If you guys have any questions, I know that was a lot of information, but just wanted to kind of give you an overview of what we do and what's going on at the federal level. And our main threat right now are those proposals that are at the Surface Transportation Board. And that's what we're going to be watching very closely.
All right, thank you very much. Very informative. So it sounds like from your perspective at the federal level, if this commission could, and the General Assembly in general in the state would just encourage the federal government to keep things the way they are and not overstep and become more regulatory in nature. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. Just status quo, what we got right now, just keep the balance regulation as it is. And that's what we're asking for.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from anyone? All right, I think we've got one from Brad Skinner online. Brad?
There we go. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Christy, I really want to second everything you said. People really need to understand how capital intensive the railroad business is. It's not like providing a service on the internet.
Right.
This requires tremendous amounts of capital if we're going to have very efficient and very competitive rail systems worldwide. And particularly in this country, it's capital intensive all the way across the board. And the other thing that I think people need to understand, we're no longer just a domestic economy where the old STB 40 years ago would regulate rates more intensely. Today, chemical manufacturers or other raw materials are being produced worldwide. And so the railroad rates are really set by the trading systems of the United States and the world. You no longer can, quote, have a monopoly over certain customers. And certainly with trucks, there's competition everywhere. Right. So I really applaud your efforts and keep it going, because it's a capital intensive industry. And if we want to make it really work for the people of Georgia and economic development, we've got to have incentives for further capital investment.
Right. Yeah, thank you for saying that. And that statistic to me of reinvesting 40 cents back on the dollar back into the industry is huge. So.
All right, thank you, Mr. Skinner. Any other questions, either from our online audience or from the commission members here? All right, well, thank you very much for that presentation, and I'm sure we'll be reaching out to you for some more information as we move forward, so thank you. Next, we have the last mile freight rail challenges and solutions. We have Mr. Skinner with Omnitrax, who will be online with us, and then we have Ben Tarbutton, who is with Sandersville Railroad Company. I believe he's here in person. And Jerry Vest with Genesee and Wyoming is also here, I believe, in person. So we'll, if y'all would come forward, and we'll get you set up. Chelsea will get you set up and we'll get started. All right, I think Madison's going to get us set up with Mr. Tarbutton first, and then from there we'll probably go to Mr. Skinner. So again, just bear with us just a little bit as we bounce between online presentations and in-person presentations. It makes it a little bit more technologically challenging.
All right, thank you. Thank you to Chairman Beach and Tanner and members. And before I get into my prepared remarks, I just want to thank all of y'all. You know, as everyone knows, we've been through an incredibly difficult period here. Hold that
Just
thought.
need to share. I want to share this screen as well. Or not. Okay, you just go ahead.
Okay. And I just think it's important for Georgians to see work being done, and this is certainly work being done. It's an important work. So I want to thank y'all for spending the time and the effort in leading our state. I've worked with several of you. I know many of you, and I especially want to have a shout out to Representative Smyrie and Senator Beach through a past life of mine in education. I know those guys really well. But this morning, I'm excited to talk about what's really near and dear to my heart, and that's short line railroading. My name again is Ben Tarbutton, and I'm president of San Angelo Railroad. And let me see if I can operate this thing. If I could, someone can help me page down or hit the page down button. Of course, it didn't work. It's probably my fault.
It's me too.
Okay, just hit page down. Call forward. Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So yeah, just the first slide is the Georgia State rail map, and it's certainly pretty obvious that railroads encompass the state of Georgia. And one of the things I'm going to talk about as I get further into my presentation, but those yellow lines, a lot of people don't know that the state of Georgia owns, I think it's about 453 miles of rail in Georgia, and they're operated by some of my colleagues. But when people ask me, you know, tell me what it is to short line railroad, and I respond is the ultimate team sport. We cannot do anything without the connections that we have with the trunk lines. And in Georgia, the two main class ones, which we'll hear from later, CSX and Norfolk Southern. And so the short line railroads that you see in this map, in fact, if you want to look real closely, you can see my railroad. We're located between Augusta and Macon, and we're just one of those little small red fingers. So we're 10 miles of main line and 35 miles of total track. And so we are, the San Angelo Railroad certainly is, and the railroads across the country that are short lines. I mean, we are the hunters and the gatherers, and we're the first mile, we're the last mile of the rail network. And when I say ultimate team sport, because, you know, we have to do what we do and we do it well, but then we hand it off to the trunk lines who, you know, take that freight safely and efficiently to destinations where, in a lot of cases, you know, short lines are making that last move, that last switch. So that's what it looks like as far as the rail map. We touch pretty much all parts of Georgia. Here's some stats that I think are very important to go through. You know, over 4,643 miles of mainline track, and that's the most in the Southeast. We haul 189 million tons of freight in Georgia. And this next bullet, I think, is a very important one. It's an interesting one for sure. But 3.9 million rail cars originate in or traveling through Georgia. I mean, so if you multiply that, because usually one rail car equals 4 trucks. So, I mean, that's, that's 16 million trucks that are off the road because of they're traveling in rail cars. We're very, very, very proud of the employees that we have. Railroad jobs are good jobs. The average annual wage and benefits is over $100,000, and we employ over 7,500 Georgians. And those fingers, that map, we go through all parts of Georgia, but we certainly are impactful in the rural areas of Georgia, and servicing agriculture, manufacturing, and the local industries that are, a part of the international marketplace. We have 29 short line railroads in Georgia. As I said earlier, the state of Georgia owns 465 route miles, and those are real lines. I mean, we are operating those lines under leases. The short line railroads, we abide by the same rules and safety regulations set forth by the Federal Railroad Administration, same laws that the Class 1s do, operate the same cars, locomotives, and we're truly small businesses that operate in especially in rural parts of the state. And this next to last bullet, I think, is a pretty important one as we transition into the funding portion of my presentation. But we operate on lighter density lines, meaning there's less car loads at slower speeds with lower freight volumes. And so these lines, they're lower revenue lines. They have less car loads. And so, it's a tough business. And I can guarantee this, the short lines throughout the country, we value every single carload piece of traffic. Go through these next slide. Rail is a critical component for the movement of freight in Georgia. And so, we're very serious, and we're going to talk about some of the existing rail funding and then the need to make sure that we work with our brethren in highway to make sure that the coordinated efforts between freight rail and the roadways and trucks make sense. The new state rail plan is coming forward, and it will identify approximately $39 million in short-term rail projects and approximately $600 million in long-term rail needs. So some of these costs can be paid by the state, but most of the costs will come from private railroad companies. And so, I want to talk a little bit about some existing funding for rail, and then some ideas that I'd like to put forth that we think are going to be important as we go forward. The first thing that's just been just a true winner that the legislature has put forth is the state short line tax credit. It's a 50% transferable tax credit for each short line railroad in the state. So that's $3,500 per mile credit, and it allows for a potential credit of $5.3 million total. Short lines invested an additional $10 million in both 2019 and 2020 to earn credits just over $5 million. So we're a very big advocate. When it was put into place, I think it was a 5-year tax credit. So the sunset will happen in 2022, and we would love to see that continue forward. And we would also like to recommend for the members to consider as part of the recommendations that you guys put forth, doubling the per mile allowance from 3,500 to 7,000. We've actually seen that in Oklahoma and different states that have a similar type program. And so that would incentivize an annual investment of approximately $21 million, which would cost the state about $5 million more. So that would be a very positive thing, and already is an extremely positive program for us here in Georgia. The next program is something that I really want to plant some seeds with the members with, and it can't be a successful program without having a catchy acronym. And so we're going to call this one the SIDE tax credit. And so SIDE stands for Strategic Industrial Development and Enhancement Tax Credit. And this is aimed at stimulating economic development and job creation in rural and economically distressed areas throughout through direct infrastructure investment and public-private partnerships. The side tax credit can drive private investment, create jobs, and stimulate jobs by keeping rural businesses, going and thriving, and plugs into the national freight network. As structured, the side tax credit would be a $25 million annual tax credit, where the tax credit is equal to 20% of the total eligible project costs. So for every $5 that we put in, $1 would be gained in tax credit. As in, the qualifying projects would be rail utilizing job creators related to port projects, mining, manufacturing, agriculture, transloads, that type of thing. And this is something that we're, really kind of starting to formulate, and we're going to be bringing this forward. That's something that we think will be very helpful as we work to get new business by rail. The legislature has been very good to us, and Governor Kemp has grown the bond package over the past several years. And that's really been very helpful to our state-owned rail lines, to help them put in cross ties rail, to do the necessary upgrades for bridges. So thank you for that. That's something that we'd love to see keep moving forward. And then also, a lot of that money and working with GDOT to improve crossings, either through grade separations or just typical grade crossing projects. So that kind of gets to the final part of the remarks that I have here, and just the last bullet there talks about truck size and weight. And I just would like to encourage you, and I know Chrissy mentioned that as well. Just would like to encourage you not to disturb or recommend to disturb the equilibrium that exists between truck size and weight and railroads now. For short lines in Georgia, there is no greater threat to our business than allowing trucks to have a heavier haul. Just to bring it home for you, half of my business from Sandersville goes to destinations within a 250-mile radius of Sandersville. And if trucks are allowed to increase their payload, it would take away from short lines, take away very much needed carloads. And every tax credit that we're talking about, would not matter, because we wouldn't have business, and the very viability of the short lines that we're trying to take care of and nurture would be questioned. So I will leave you with a plea to not increase truck size and weights in Georgia for the safety of all Georgians, for the livelihoods of Georgia short lines, and because the pro-business government is here to ensure that capitalism thrives, and we're not picking winners and losers. And with that, I think we're turning it over to Brad Skinner. That's next. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And before you sit down, let's see if we have any questions for you. I was going to ask you, and you really hit on it, for specific recommendations. And just to recap, and you tell me if I missed something. One is to make sure that we keep and extend the current tax credit that was implemented by the General Assembly, because you said it was working. It's created an investment opportunity. And then to consider doubling the per mile amount that would be available, and which would cost the state around $5 million more on an annual basis. And then the idea of the side tax credit, which would be funded at about $25 million annually, which would be specific projects for every $5 of an investment, a $1 tax credit. So that's a specific recommendation. not increasing truck weights was a specific request. And then the last one being the same as Go Rail, encouraging our federal partners not to do anything that changes the current regulation structure. Okay. Thank you. Any questions? I believe Tom Gale with GMA has a question online. Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me all right?
We got you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So Ben, I really appreciate the partnership that short line railroads have with our rural communities. As you probably know, most of my members are not the big cities in Atlanta. They are smaller, more rural communities, and we really appreciate the partnership. We're not going to have a position on the short line tax credit at GMA, but I couldn't help but be reminded of that old song, the Chattanooga Choo Choo, with that lyric, "Can you afford to board the Chattanooga Choo Choo? I've got my fare and just a trifle to spare." That's more of a question for state leadership. But I just wanted to thank you for your partnership in the short line railroads, working with rural communities on everything from closures and maintenance of crossings, but also I do want to echo your sentiments related to the potential impacts on short line railroads from any proposal that would increase truck weights. So we've got the same sort of concerns about economic impacts as well as infrastructure costs as it relates to that. So thanks for being a part of this process, Ben.
Good to see you virtually.
All right. Any other questions? All right. If not, I think we're going to let Jerry Vest with Genesee and Wyoming go next. We'll give Chelsea a minute to set up the presentation and we'll get started.
Those. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chairman Beach and Chairman Tanner and the commissioners on this commission. It's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Jerry Vest. I'm Senior Vice President of Government and Industry Affairs for Genesee and Wyoming. I'll tell you a little bit more about G&W and our connection to Georgia in my presentation. I've been in the industry 34 years now. I've been working for G&W for 16. And as my title suggests, I'm responsible for our government and industry affairs in the U.S. So I think it's wonderful that this commission is formed and that you all are doing what you're doing. Those of us that are involved in rail freight transportation fully appreciate, when we do it successfully, we fully appreciate this is a derived demand. No one moves freight for the joy of moving it. They move it because it needs to be moved. But having said that, having understood that rail freight is a derived demand, it also is a significant part of the effort to bring growth and jobs to any area. And that's certainly true from a short line standpoint for rural areas of Georgia. And so we really relish that role at G&W, and we're happy to be part of it. So what I'd like to cover briefly are 3 topics and spend a little bit more time on the 4th. The short line rail industry, I'll talk about just very briefly. Ben did a great job talking about short lines in Georgia, so I'm not really going to spend any time on that. I'll give you all a brief overview of G&W and what we do in Georgia. And then I have a Georgia short line case study, which I hope you'll find interesting and helpful. So statistically, short line railroads, there are about 580 of us across the continental 48 states. No freight railroad in Hawaii and only a regional railroad in Alaska. The average short line is 22 employees, 6 locomotives, and this is from the American Short Line Regional Railroad Association. Its average length of haul for a revenue carload is 32 miles, and we typically serve 15 customers. And I would say 15 is a very good number from a G&W standpoint, but what we see on most short lines is we'll have 15 customers, but 1 or 2 will be the cornerstones that carry the railroad economically and financially. Annual revenues of a typical short line or average short lines, 4.75 million a year, which in the scope of railroading is not very much. It's about 1/10 of the formal threshold for a definition of a short line railroad by the Surface Transportation Board, which is 40.4 million revenue a year. So there are some short lines that are close to that limit, but most of them are about 1/10 of it, which is fascinating. From a public policy standpoint, we're the critical part, we think, of the private-owned rail freight infrastructure. Is been said that we provide this first and last mile of transportation. Freight railroading isn't like trucking or air freight. You give a package to UPS, UPS is going to deliver it, not FedEx. Freight railroading, over 95% of our short line business, we hand off to another railroad, most typically a large railroad like CSX or NS. So freight railroading is truly a network. It's not just a bunch of autonomous companies. Ben touched on that too, certainly. So collectively, the short line industry serves over 10,000 customers across the United States, across all sorts of commodities, ag, energy, manufacturing, just a great portfolio. And we connect these customers in areas where if it wasn't for us, they probably wouldn't have rail freight service to this national network. So they can effectively and safely reach their domestic and international customers. So for these reasons, we feel like our industry, although it's made up of a bunch of very small companies and operations, is a critical part of the structure of freight transportation in the United States. I won't spend any time on this. Ben did a great job covering it. So G&W. We started in 1899 as a 14-mile short line railroad in upstate New York. And we have grown over the years significantly. We're now the largest holding company of small freight railroads in the United States. We also have a major presence in the UK. We're the major container operator in the UK. And we own and manage our own inland port network in the UK. And the final dray services out of those inland ports. We have 116 freight railroads, about 13,000 miles of track, 7,300 employees, about 3,000 customers, shipping about 2.4 million carloads annually. In the United States, and you can see that little arrow up there points to that 14-mile railroad in 1899. Today, we have a significant footprint across the United States, a very important footprint in Georgia that I'll get to in a moment. We have a presence in 42 states, which from a government affairs standpoint keeps my team and me very busy. 4 provinces in Canada, 113 short line regional railroads with about the same number of track miles as we do as an entire corporation. And that's largely driven because in the UK and Europe, it's a federal network, a national network in those countries. We don't own the track, but we do own some track in our terminals and other operations. Our core purpose as a company is something that all of us at G&W are quite attached to. It's to be the safest and most respected transportation service provider in the world. There are 2 metrics we use when we evaluate how we're doing against that I think almost every employee in our company are aware of. On the safety front, we hold ourselves to strive to have 0 injuries every day. We understand that it's a great way to evaluate safety on a freight railroad is to look at the FRA injury ratio, which is the number of reportable injuries per 200,000 man hours. It's a way of looking at railroads of all different sizes and locations on a consistent basis. Our aggregated numbers for G&W across all our properties, and we include in this, we hold like our European operations and Canadian operations, which are not under obviously FRA regs to the same FRA reporting standards. But we are an industry leader in this metric of safety. We think this is an important one for us because if railroaders are not getting injured, they're doing their job safely and efficiently, they're doing it correctly, they're watching out for one another, they're being well trained. We think that's very important. It's an indicator of a safe operation. So every other year on customer satisfaction or our respect is we commission J.D. Powers to approach every customer we have on every railroad we have in Europe and the United States. Of course, it's voluntary, whether they take part in a survey. It's a significant survey looking at a lot of different aspects of how we provide our services. Because it's J.D. Powers, they can compare us to companies in other transportation modes, including the work they do with the Class 1 carriers, which makes up the other railroads on this chart, and the trucking industry. Our goal is to reach what J.D. Powers, to exceed what J.D. Powers calls a sticky customer. That means if on a scale of 0 to 10, if the customer rates you at 8, that means they want to do business with you. All things being equal, if they want to do business with you. So that, of course, is something that any company would like to obtain with their customers. And we're getting very, very close to 8 on a composite scale. It's important with this metric too. This isn't just for us to aggregate and decide how we're doing, but this is on a railroad basis. So if we get something that is below 8, significantly below 8, it gives us an opportunity to identify where we need to improve. And that's something we take at heart too. So in Georgia, we have 11 Class 3 short lines, 3 of which are on state-owned properties, the CCKY, Hog, and Georgia Southwestern. So part of the commission is my landlord for these properties. Commissioner, it's good to see you. I hope we're paying our rent on time. We have over 900 miles, almost 900 miles of track, over 200 employees, and we handle a wide portfolio of commodities, as you would expect with this type of footprint across the state. Our first railroad was in 1997. Actually, 2 that year, the Savannah Terminal operation serving the Port of Savannah, and the Golden Isle Terminal Railroad, which is south of Savannah there. But you can see by the dates associated with each railroad, we've had a significant continual growth in Georgia. We view this as a critical state for G&W, and one that's had tremendous opportunities and challenges at times over the years. So that tees into the case study I wanted to talk through with you all, if I could briefly. And that is on the Georgia Central, which you see there. It runs 211 miles between Savannah and Macon. So this railroad actually dates back to 1885, older than G&W itself. It was originally the Macon and Dublin Railroad, later restructured and renamed to the Macon, Dublin, and Savannah Railroad, which defines pretty much what it is today. It eventually became part of CSX. And, you know, earlier, Kristen from Go Rail talked about the Staggers Act in 1980 and what that meant for the rail freight industry. One element of the Staggers Act basically allowed large railroads like CSX and NS to more easily sell off or lease their lines rather than abandon them when they weren't meeting their objectives. And this railroad fell into that category, and it was sold, and then part of it sold, part of it leased to its first owner, a gentleman by the name of Earl Durden out of the Panhandle of Florida. His company was Rail Management Corporation. Mr. Durden had a good portfolio of railroads through the Southeast. Georgia Central was kind of the crown jewel of his holdings. And as Ben can relate, it was tied to kaolin largely. His traffic base was driven by a kaolin producer in the Dry Branch area of Twiggs County. Unfortunately, unlike Ben's source of kaolin, and I'm glad, Ben, yours is a lot more stable, that producer ran into significant problems in the 1990s, both from a labor and production standpoint, and ended up closing in 1999. And so that was a massive loss of traffic for this railroad. It was over 16,000 carloads a year, which is significant for any short line, but it was really bad on the Georgia Central. We acquired the railroad in 2005, as I said before, It was part of us acquiring all of Rail Management Properties. So we bought it knowing it had some revenue challenges. But that was only part of it. So we started this railroad looking at an infrastructure that needed to be improved and in critical need of new revenue. So there were some opportunities that came up but weren't successful initially. Before we acquired the railroad in 2003, some of you all in this room will remember when Daimler Chrysler, back when Mercedes owned Chrysler, was looking to build a cargo van plant. They were a day away from the public announcement of a commitment to build it in Pooler when their board pulled the plug on it. And that was an unfortunate development. Something like being the serving carrier to a major auto assembly plant is like the holy grail for a short line. And so we didn't have that when we bought this property, but it was kind of an affirmation of how important the Pooler site is outside Savannah, which the Georgia Central is the serving carrier. Another near miss was when Range Fuels built a cellulosic ethanol facility in Soferton back in, well, they broke ground in 2007, built the plant, and it really never did commercial production, ended up going bankrupt, closing in January of 2011. So there were these efforts out there, and these are just a couple that just didn't bear fruit. But we had some infrastructure problems with it too, the railroad. The prior owner did not, he took care of the railroad, but unfortunately, a lot of the cross ties, typical short line cross ties, creosote, hardwood treated tie, were improperly creosoted. And they look good. If you went down the railroad, you could look at them and they say it's not fractured, it's not rotting, but you could actually reach down and pull the spike, cut spike out of the track structure. And what was happening was when they were treated with creosote, they weren't properly treated. So the core was never treated. And what the ties were doing was rotting from the inside out. And so we had thousands and thousands of ties on this railroad that we had to replace. Almost every one of the 55 bridge structures on the railroad required significant work. None of them were suitable to carry the industry standard 286,000 pound loaded rail car. There was a significant need for rail on the main line. And because of the rail and the bridges, the weight limit on the line was restricted to 263,000 pounds, significantly below the industry standard. And what that means from a policy standpoint, it puts the customers at a disadvantage. If they can't ship a fully loaded modern freight car, they're limited in their ability to compete. So we had a real big fork in the road on this railroad. I mean, there were some that thought part of the strength of this railroad is it connects with CSX and NS, so we can give our customers unbiased access to both properties. We connect with Norfolk Southern and Macon, and in Savannah, we connect with CSX. But part of what we looked at was the potential to make the economics of this railroad work. It was severing the middle of it and basically taking it out of service. We did not do that because it would have compromised our ability to grow the property and to give this dual access to all our customers on it. So what we started to do was see what we had to do to undertake upgrading this railroad, fixing its infrastructure problems. And it was part of the logic of us hiring our own bridge crew, which is unusual for a short line company, to basically rebuild the bridges ourselves, not bring a contractor in, but to do it ourselves. So between 2012 and last year, we basically rebuilt every bridge on this railroad ourselves with our own crews, and most of them are wood trestles to handle this 286,000 pound modern freight car. We initiated a long-term tie replacement program. The economics of this railroad would not allow us to go in and replace every defective tie immediately. So we restricted the speed and weight of cars until we could adequately replace enough to safely handle them. The rail replacement effort continues. It's something that is going to require more work in the future, but we've been plugging away at that. And most recently, the city of Dublin really is a testimonial to the partnerships we have with the local communities we serve, submitted a federal CRISI grant for in part replacing more of that rail. Remember I said up front, the average short line generates 4.75 million a year in revenue. So from 2008 to 2020, G&W, really the Georgia Central, invested over 52 million to make these improvements. It's a phenomenal, freight railroading is not for the faint of heart. It's an extraordinarily capital intensive industry, one of the most in the country. And I'm sure the commissioner would appreciate the similarities with the highway network. I mean, there's always ways to spend money on it. And what we have to do is spend what we can afford to accomplish the most for safe and efficient operations. But this is a massive long-term commitment that we have in the Georgia Central. When we rebuild a bridge, we expect it to last for a long time. We replace a cross tie, it should last at least 15 to 30 years, depending upon its condition of use. A piece of rail, new rail, welded rail, should last 80 to 100 years on a short line. So these are very long-term commitments we're making. So quite fortunately, we've started to have some success in all these business development efforts. 2010, Mitsubishi Power Systems built a world-class gas turbine generating facility at the Pooler site outside Savannah. We're the serving carrier of that. And they've expanded this facility several times, which is a great testimonial to not only Mitsubishi, but to the business climate in Georgia to support that. And we'd like to think we had a little bit of piece in that. After the Kalen closed, our major customer on the railroad was SP Newsprint. As their name implies, they made newsprint. And that facility in Dublin, as you all can appreciate, newsprint has had a rocky go of it. Luckily, in 2015, WestRock bought out, at that time it was called SP Fiber, and converted that plant from newsprint to container stock production. And so with e-commerce, container stock has been in high demand, and that's been a godsend for the Georgia Central. And most recently, a major success was the construction of a 1 million square foot facility by Plastic Express to basically handle export plastic resins. Again, this was built at the Pooler site through the port of Savannah. Great example of how we're facilitating Georgia's play in the international marketplace. So the value of this railroad, public value, we think is significant and very real. It's part of an engine of economic growth in a rural part of southern Georgia. We offer this highly competitive access to CSX and NS and the National Rail Network, and that's part of the catalyst that we can provide for industry and job growth in an area that, you know, just, I'm not sure how many railroads would be in Dublin if it wasn't for the Georgia Central. I mean, it's just, it's definitely a rural area between Savannah and Macon. As Georgia DOT, I know, appreciates, every freight car we handle are 4 trucks. They're not on I-15, US 80 or 280 or Georgia 15, which parallel this railroad. And so that's infrastructure, the public infrastructure that's not being consumed. And while we don't get directly to the port of Georgia, the Savannah port, we do directly support its initiatives, and the Plastic Express success is representative of that. So finally, what are the lessons learned here with this case study? A short line can be a catalyst for economic growth in a rural area, as we've been in rural southern Georgia, and we've demonstrated to be a key partner in those efforts. We're definitely a work in progress. I mean, 15 years to get this railroad to be able to handle a modern freight car is a long time. It's a long time, but you know, these short lines don't have unlimited cash flows. I mean, we have to operate within the construct of what cash we can generate off the property. And so 15 years is quite a commitment, but we're getting there. It really begs the question of what is the opportunity cost of having this go over a 15-year period. And I think that's very real. I mean, for the Georgia Central under G&W ownership, we toughed it out. Not every short line will have that ability. I mean, severing the railroad under other ownership would have been a real possible outcome. When we consider it, anyone could have considered it. And typically, once a piece of railroad's gone, I mean, this is why Georgia DOT has ownership of railroads. They were the owner of last resort for these properties, because if Georgia as a state hadn't stepped up for them, they would have been ripped up. They'd be trails today, or reverted back to property owners. There are three possible ways, if I could offer, I'd suggest how we could speed this up. The continuation of the Georgia State Short Line Tax Credit Program that Ben referenced. We should be able to have opportunities to partnership with Georgia DOT on future federal grant opportunities. Rail grant opportunity of Chrissy is a great example. Even if Georgia DOT can't put up match money, just having that type of endorsement is very, very important because these are highly competitive grants. And finally, if there is a way to help the non-state owned lines through legislation or other activities by the state, that would be very desirable, I think. I want to thank you all so much for your interest and your invitation here this morning.
Mr. Vest, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your investment in our state. I've got two quick questions. One, you talked a lot about you can only do so much because of the revenue that you bring in, and you did talk about some capital expenditures you've made, and thank you for that. But are there any opportunities for you to generate revenue? Last year, Senator Gooch worked real hard on a rural broadband bill to try to get broadband into the rural parts of our state. Is there any opportunities for y'all to do that along your right of way to generate revenue?
Well, that's a great question. Typically, these lines have been integrated into the fiber optic network when they were under Class 1 ownership in the 70s and 80s, or we've done some of that too on our own. But we're always aggressively looking for other opportunities besides just moving rail freight cars on our lines. Typically, we don't have a lot of that. I mean, I don't pretend to be a fiber optics or telecommunications expert, but they will try to link the major hubs, and they usually will work with the Class 1 carriers for that type of corridor. But if that's ever an opportunity, we would absolutely pursue it.
Okay. Then secondly, real quickly, I know you cover the whole United States, I believe you said. Are you seeing any other states doing any kind of innovative besides the tax credits we're doing and so on? Is there any ideas out there you see at different states that we could consider as we move forward?
That too, I appreciate the question. I tell people, I've spent the bulk of my career not in government affairs for the railroad industry, but in more line type jobs. And I never dreamed I'd be in government affairs. If I had, I would have paid more attention to my civics class in high school. But one thing that has been really impressive to me in a learning experience over the last 16 years has been how much states are different and how they approach everything. And that's actually a strength of our country, is a republic of states. States have taken all different approaches with this. Some have absolutely nothing to help. Others have a robust means of integrating the program into of support for short lines into things like economic development. And I'd be happy to work with the commission. You all don't want me to take the time now, but I'll be happy to work with you all later to talk through what other states are doing to the best of my ability and knowledge.
One of the things that you I don't think you really addressed it directly, but in Georgia, one of the things that has been talked about considerably that limits Georgia's ability to invest in the rail network is the gratuities clause. Been a lot of conversation around what the state can, what they cannot do around investment that would benefit maybe a private corporation. At the federal level, they do grants and other things directly to these private entities. What's your thoughts on that from a gratuity clause, Georgia being able to do more to invest directly in the rail infrastructure? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, we all need to be, we as a corporate citizen of the state, you all as representatives of the state directly or through the commission indirectly, we all need to be compliant with the state constitution. So it is what it is. I mean, we get that. But in an ideal world, some of these challenging major infrastructure investments we make that can't be picked up and moved to Mexico or China. I mean, we fix a bridge on the Georgia Central, it's going to be there until it needs to be fixed again or it's abandoned. I mean, these aren't mobile. To the degree that we can take projects like this and speed them up, or just do them to begin with a public-private partnership can be very important. And the way I would suggest the state consider that, if a way can be found to address the gratuities clause, is to develop a process, and other states have done this, where the public benefits are identified and measured, the benefits to the railroad are identified and measured, and that then drives the partnership. I personally think it's a major mistake for in this country, for any state or the federal government to subsidize freight railroading. If we can't have an ongoing viable operation without a direct public subsidy, we should go out of business. I mean, it's the way our economy should work, in my opinion. But these infrastructure investments are beyond the daily operation of the railroad. As I said before, they're extremely long-lived. And to the degree that we can all feel comfortable of identifying the public benefits associated with them, that could be a catalyst or a basis for a public-private partnership to do the work.
Yeah, because one of the things, if you look at your highway network, we build roads and other infrastructure to attract a business, for instance, to a community, or we connect the port and give the ability to move freight in and out of the port more effectively, or connect pooler in that area that generate for the private sector to make money. It's been a little bit more challenging, I think, in the rail realm. And maybe as we move forward, I don't want to put Commissioner McMurray on the spot, but he may have some ideas of, because this commission, even though we operate within the confines of the state constitution, if there's ways that we can tweak that, then this commission needs to look at that too in the report that we're submitting, because currently it may not be allowed, but there may need to be tweaks, which can be done through legislation and ultimately a vote of our citizens. And we pass constitutional amendments every 2 years that are ultimately voted on. So, and I know Commissioner McMurray probably has some ideas on that. So as we move forward, that's something I think we at least need to consider.
I totally agree. I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. And let me just say one final thing. I'll come back to where I started. I want to commend you all for looking at this in the detail you are. Not every state is doing this. And the ability to understand how freight moves, how logistics works in a state is, I believe, fundamental to its long-term success in generating industrial or economic growth and creating new jobs. And so I think you all are to be commended on it. And I do appreciate to be part of this. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any other questions, either here in person or online? All right. Thank you very much. I think next we're going to our online presenter, who's also one of our commission members, and appreciate his work over the last 2 years on this effort, is Mr. Brad Skinner with OmniTrax. Mr. Skinner, we'll turn it over to you.
Chairman Beach and Chairman Tanner, thank you very much. And to my fellow commission members, as I understand, we've had a little trouble. I'm going to hit the share screen button, but I don't seem to see my presentation. So, okay. Let's see. Nope. I guess. So can you hear me all right?
Yes, we got you.
Okay, I guess I'm going to have to operate without slides. So again, thank you so much for having me here today. Ben and Jerry have already discussed some very specific considerations that the commission certainly can take forward in its final report. And so what I'd like to do is just, again, give you, I want to make up a little time here because I want to keep us on schedule. My background is about 24 years in the rail industry and I privatized the Mexican National Railroad. So I've learned a lot about private investment and how things can change. That railroad we bought for 1.3 billion is now worth theoretically 15 billion. And railroads in general, if you just invest them and make them engines of economic growth, really can make a huge difference in any community. The first slide I had up here is just about Omnitrax. Omnitrax has 4 properties within Georgia. We have about also 2,700 acres in the Savannah area under development, and we've brought in to that process about 95 million of investment directly. And also we have about 200 million more of investment ready as we continue to expand that 2,700 acres. And we view that as a tremendous opportunity going forward. The Georgia Port Authority and what they've done there and what they eventually will do with Hutchinson Island. Georgia will remain a primary port for the United States, and its reach for Georgians will be incredible. And certainly the 30,000 jobs it's already created are a testament to Mega Rail, what's about to happen with NS and CSX, and with future investment. But we also run about 275 miles of rail within Georgia. And those are found at the Georgia, Florida, and Albany. I said that right because I used to live there. And we recently saw a Georgia Pacific plant expanding there. We have the Savannah Gateway, which I talked about, huge industrial park, and it truly is a public-private partnership that we're working on. And also a partnership with the Class 1s. It's served both by NS and CSX. In Fulton County, where we're literally, as you may know if you've ever been out there, we're reinventing the land use and services. Americold just built a huge $1 billion facility. And that's just, hopefully, it's very close, as you know, to the center of Atlanta. So it's a great investment going forward and a real tool for economic growth. And then we serve the Woodlands area. That's in Wilkes County. And we serve various cities there and all kinds of products around that market. We've invested altogether about $4.5 billion in 20 railroad properties around the United States. And what we do is with local real estate developers, we reuse old industrial properties and we refurbish them and we make them fit for new purpose in terms of imports and exports. On the next page of my proverbial slides there, we'll continue to invest in Georgia because we really view our role as an economic engine for development. And what we do is we work with property developers, we work with investors, and we make rail easy to use. We do transloads. We do all kinds of things so that we continue to grow the communities in which we operate in. Omnitrax, prior to the COVID, was growing at about 20% per year. We're growing at less this year, but we'll get back onto it. But we work with the Class 1s, and as Ben and Jerry talked about, we're the first and last mile. We're the hunters and the gatherers. We work with customers because we want to see our economic communities in which we have physical assets develop and prosper and become centers for import and export, not only within the United States, but internationally. And we've done that. Port of Brownsville as an example. When we took over that railroad, they were doing about $300,000 of EBITDA or cash flow per year on their railroad. They're doing about 13 billion today, million rather today. It's you can make a huge difference in the life of the community and the people you employ. Logistically, with transload services, we're providing those at all of our short line properties, including all our Georgian properties. And again, this focus, Jerry touched on it, that rail and distribution centers in rural Georgia can make a huge impact on making these places desirable for international and domestic investors and become centers of import and manufacturing. Now, obviously, that has to be joined. Rail is a very effective tool to do it, particularly if it's linked to the port. But it also needs to be have the fiber optics there, have the training there, the skill training there, so that folks in rural Georgia can have the same benefits as folks in urban Georgia. But I know you all are moving down those paths to identify those opportunities. OmniTrax in general, though, is very creative, and we're very fast in how we respond. And we have about $6 billion under management of the Bro Group, which Pat Bro owns OmniTrax, and we'll continue to expand. And we're working in Western Georgia right now on an inland terminal. We're going to continue to keep focusing because we believe Georgia to be one of the most business-friendly environments in the United States. It and Texas are at the top of our list. So when I think about the future, I just think about the challenges of both the short lines and the Class 1 railroads. We just have to be as effective and efficient as possible and realize that these are real tools. Railroad is real tools to not only expanding the reach of Georgian ports and Georgian manufacturing sites to the Midwest, to the Northeast. It's a way to really create jobs if we make that infrastructure very efficient. I see a real need for us to collaborate with the state. And some of that's been touched on earlier, not only in terms of investment, but technology implementation. You got Siemens right down the road and some of their automation capabilities, and just make it a major priority of the state. And then clearly align with the state on a comprehensive rail strategy with our rail partners, both short lines as well as Class 1s. I know Commissioner McMurray has already identified about $121 billion of needs, capital infrastructure needs over the next 30 years. Well, one way to do that is to have a comprehensive rail strategy to deal with some of the inhibitors that Chairman Tanner talked about just a few minutes ago, and to beef up DOT in terms of its rail capabilities, similar to what North Carolina has done, Virginia's done. Just look at that as options. And then also look at the ability to somehow employ private capital for major structural improvements that need to happen if we're going to continue to maintain quality of life and maintain job opportunities for all Georgians. When you think about private capital, and I'll be giving a presentation to the Commission on December 2nd on public-private partnerships, private capital can build tunnels and bridges. It can build overpasses and underpasses. It can build all kinds of inland terminals. There's ways to do this, and it's been done in many, many states throughout the United States. And maybe there's opportunities for creating more SRTAs, which you have done as a state for specific purposes. But we can explore all of that, and I'm exploring it right now with Mark De St. Aubin and with Seth Milliken and other members of the Georgia Chamber, which will be part of that information shared on December 2nd. The risk of not looking at this in a comprehensive way and developing priorities in terms of what do we need to do each year for the next 10 years to maintain quality of life and to maintain growth and opportunity for all Georgians, it's significant. So we can't be fragmented, and we've got to have a comprehensive strategy, and this commission could recommend a lot of that, because that will in fact allow Georgia to grow, to become an investor mecca for all kinds of folks, both internationally and domestically, and at the same time do things right and maintain the quality of life for all Georgians. So I know we're running behind, so I'll shut up.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Skinner. First, I just want to say thank you for all you do as a member of the commission. You've also done a good job. I know Chairman Beach and I appointed a subcommittee this year. Commissioner McMurray's here. There's other members of that commission, but Mr. Skinner is chairing that subcommittee. So thank you for all you're doing. And this time we'll open it up for any questions. Do we have any from either online folks or from commission members who are here? All right. One of the things that I know Brad has talked a lot about over the last 2 years, and that this subcommittee's looking at is there's a way to spur economic development through the investment on rail infrastructure and the investment in infrastructure. And Chairman Beach said this morning in another meeting we were in, but investment drives economic growth. And I think it's the same way in highways as it is in rails. So looking forward to, I think you all, Commissioner, presenting at the December meeting, is that right? Or on that subcommittee report. So we're looking forward to hearing the results of that. But again, Mr. Skinner, thank you very much. I don't see any questions.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Beach. I will say in just a minute, Chelsea's going to bring lunch in for the commission members. We're just going to have a working lunch and keep right on working. So Chairman Beach.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to call the Class 1 folks up, Craig Camuso and Connor Poe. We are running a little bit behind. So if you can help us make up a little time. I want to thank you for what y'all do for our state. I would tell you one of our goals is, and we were talking about in the previous meeting this morning, Chairman Tanner and I, is about 17 or 18% of the freight coming out of the ports on rail, the rest truck traffic. We'd like to get that up to 30, 35%. We're doing our part by investing in the Jimmy Mason Rail Yard. And we want to see what we can do to help you guys through, investment on your part or whatnot to grow that freight coming out of the port. And I think if I could ask one question, I don't want to put Stephanie Smith on the spot, but I think the real question is, how do we get the Home Depots of the world to put their freight on rail instead of a truck? Is it time, or why do they put their product on a truck instead of rail? And how can we get them, if you put 4 trucks on a rail car, how can we get them to want to work with you guys and put more freight on rail so we can take some of these trucks off the road? So that's kind of what we want to hear from you, from your challenges and solutions, and how we can make that happen.
Okay, well, I'm going to put this aside. With specifically on Home Depot, I believe Home Depot's been a valued customer of ours in the past, and we can certainly talk about that. I mean, really, it's about locations and where we have lines that run into their facilities, into their distribution facilities. I think I agree with you from a port standpoint. As imports and exports continue, hopefully to increase as we get through the time that we're in right now, we'll be in a position where we can talk with our partners at Home Depot and other customers, UPS, of course, as we move it in right now, one of our largest customers, especially this time of year as we move into the holiday season. But I do believe that a lot of it has to do with those locations, putting those facilities in rail served areas that make it to a point that can increase the fluidity as well as the efficiency and safety from a railroad standpoint is job one. I mean, I hope you would agree with that.
I will generally say, yes, I agree. I think a lot of it is location. I think a lot of it is length of haul. And we actually are the person who leads rail for Home Depot is actually here, and he's presenting after you. So we can talk a little bit more about it.
Super. Yeah, I look forward to hearing from him. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. I'm Craig Camuso with CSX Transportation, and along with partner Connor Poe with Norfolk Southern, we're going to present to you, as I do know that we are running a little bit behind. But fortunately, we have presented in front of this committee, this commission twice already, last year down in Savannah, as well as about this time a year ago in Waycross, to talk about the Class 1 railroads and the benefit that we believe can be derived from greater uses of our network. I wanted to thank Chairman Tanner as well. I think this might be, I was going to say this is going to be probably the last time I'll be in front of him as an elected official, at least short term, but do greatly appreciate the work that he has done in leading the Transportation Committee, as well as Chairman Beach, and the fine work that you do and your vision. And we thank you for having the opportunity. You've heard a lot of stats here over the last hour or so from the railroad, and I wanted to underscore what's been said by our partners in the short line, but also really kind of bring it home from a Georgia standpoint. When you look at rankings from an employment standpoint, from the wages that we pay, from the carloads originated and terminated, as well as the rail ton miles that are moved, Georgia ranks in the top 10 in the nation from a railroad standpoint, and number 1 in the Southeast. So it's a big, the Georgia is a very big freight railroad state. It means a lot to the state of Georgia, but also the state of Georgia means a lot to the freight railroads. And when I talk about that, we talk about the amount of trains that we move. Waycross, Georgia, where you were last year, one of the largest classification yards on the East Coast, is located there and operated by CSX, where we move about 50 trains a day, both through, to, and from Waycross. And then, of course, as Connor will talk about, Norfolk Southern is moving their headquarters to Atlanta. So this state will continue to be very important in terms of freight railroad. We'll present some projects that have been identified by GDOT, which is in the process of completing their updating their state rail plan. Norfolk Southern, CSX, as well as the short lines have all been involved in that, and they've identified some good projects that could be considered in terms of helping, again, the fluidity, the efficiency, and the safety for moving freight. But also want to give you really one key stat as it relates to the class 1s. And if you don't remember anything else, it would be this, because what we're here and we're talking about projects and we're asking about things that the state could possibly consider, but keep this in mind. And that number is $1.6 billion. That's the amount of money that CSX and Norfolk Southern, the class 1s, have put into the state infrastructure in the last 5 years. 1.6 billion. That includes mostly maintaining the tracks that we have, but in addition to adding, extending sidings, which we are doing right now, communications and signals equipment, an awful lot is put into. And we've also partnered on the inland ports that were just mentioned for CSX up in Chatsworth, for Norfolk Southern, hopefully in Gainesville here in a time that's going to be not too far in the future. And as well as what Brad just said, the discussions of another one in the LaGrange area over in West Georgia. So an awful lot of investment goes into the state. I think Christy mentioned we're the most capital intensive industry in the nation. About 18 cents out of every dollar that we make goes right back into our infrastructure. So when we talk about partnering with the state, or we talk about projects that can be possibly funded by the state, we don't view this as a handout. I think we've all been very consistent. We view this as a partnership, a public-private partnership, because of the money that we are putting back into our infrastructure. In addition, of course, we've talked about the intermodal facilities that are operated in the past, our past presentations by CSX and Norfolk Southern here in Atlanta. NS has Austell, as well as Atlanta. While we closed our Holsey yard, which is right here in the shadow of the state capitol a couple of years ago, we have reopened it recently because of our transload operations, which have become so great. We needed more capacity, so we reopened the Holsey yard. And of course, we expanded our Fairburn intermodal facility to transfer that traffic from Holsey down to Fairburn. And the intermodal business is very robust right now, and we see that continuing to happen. From an Atlanta standpoint, Norfolk Southern and CSX enter the city from 8 different directions, literally from every direction you can think of coming in to Atlanta. These are main lines. So there continues to be an awful lot of through traffic and terminating traffic that comes into the city of Atlanta, which does create a fair amount of bottlenecks. And we are both, our companies are looking to try to remedy those types of issues. But what I really want to get down to today are what we have, and Connor will speak as well to some of the specific projects on Norfolk Southern, but kind of 3 main recommendations / suggestions for the commission to consider in terms really of partnering with the rail industry. We are, as we see more freight and as we see technology that has changed in the industry, we are running longer trains. And those trains run through the hundreds of municipalities through the state of Georgia. And we understand that has an impact on the state, has an impact on the citizens. So how do we address that? We are looking at trying to extend our sidings so that we have longer passing sidings. And the thing was, it was just probably a decade or so ago that we extended these sidings to kind of 10,000 feet. We're now looking at extending those sidings much longer than that to accommodate the longer trains. which is something that we are looking particularly for CSX along the WNA, which is the line that is owned by the state, leased by CSX, that runs from Chattanooga into Atlanta. We run probably 30, 40 trains a day on that line. And we are also looking at the tremendous amount of traffic that we have put into what we call our Fitzgerald sub, which is down in the South Georgia standpoint. So we are looking at extending those sidings there. But again, we're running longer trains. And what that needs, and the commissioner has mentioned this, I believe, in the past, is grade separations. And specifically, I mean, we would love to grade separate everywhere. When I started with CSX, I was told your job is to close every single grade crossing in the state. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But the point being is that those present challenges for us. They present significant liability. But from a safety standpoint, it's safety for the motoring public. But I can mention two on the CSX line. One is down in Waycross, which I know it's been well documented, I think, the US 1 overpass, and as well as then going to the other side of the state in Graysville, Georgia, right on the Georgia-Tennessee line, which there's a crossing there that the Chattanooga metropolitan area, which now includes Ringgold and into the Dalton area, growth has exploded there. But that's also the first crossing that you see, and there's a siding there that comes out of our Chattanooga yard in Tennessee. So 20 years ago, for us to park a train there at that siding was no big deal. Now, when we park a train there, you have traffic backs up considerably. There's also, unfortunately, been a couple of fatal accidents there. We've been in touch and have talked and have actually supported the Catoosa County's efforts to grade separate that crossing. Obviously, funding is at the end of the day the bottom line, but that is one that we'd like to see considered as, and I believe GDOT has that high on their priority list when and if the time presents itself. And again, Connor will present some particularly issues with Norfolk Southern. Number two in the suggestions is grade crossing partnership. We have about 6,500 grade crossings between all of us here in the state of Georgia, and we are responsible for maintaining those crossings. Of course, a lot of these are public roads. A lot of these are torn up by vehicles and heavy truck traffic. CSX and NS spend about $14 million a year just to maintain those grade crossings. What we would like to see is a cost sharing program similar with something, and even funding available through the 170 that allows the state to partner with us to help in the maintenance of those grade crossings. That's an awful lot of money that we spend to help the motoring public. If that's money that we could take somewhere else and invest into that infrastructure, again, referencing that 1.6 billion figure, that would certainly help, because again, we're the most capital intensive industry in the nation. And then number three, and this has been touched on, this commission last year came out with a recommendation that the General Assembly passed to put a line item in the GDOT budget for freight rail projects. And I know we've talked about the gratuities clause here, but we truly believe that the public benefit to freight rail can certainly be shown. And when you talk about gratuities clause, I think the state of Virginia also has a gratuities clause, and a court case did work out in favor of businesses, the railroads, when it talks about public benefit. When you talk about the environmental benefits, the safety benefits, the cost benefits to the citizens of the state, we believe from a line item standpoint that we can certainly prove that there's a true public benefit to investing in freight rail, and for the state investing in freight rail. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Connor and let him kind of address some of the other issues within Norfolk Southern and add anything that I might have missed.
Thank you, Craig. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for giving me a couple minutes. I'm standing between you guys and lunch, so I'm going to be quick because there's been a lot of railroad talk already this morning. You know, to get that service, Chairman Beach, to be able to get that business, you know, we have to be able to have a network to be able to get the product to market quicker. And right now it's coming, because the railroads, the class ones, are putting in the infrastructure to make sure we can do that. We have to get truck service on a rail. How do we do that? Right in the South, we have single lane rail. So we need more sidings. We need extended sidings. I'm going to give you an example of one that just came up recently with some of the hurricanes And then with some of the hurricanes that came with some derailments that we had to put, we could have used. And then then obviously with the increased volume out of the port. So we're working on a private-public partnership with us and the Georgia Ports Authority on extending a siding that's the closest siding on our rail coming out of the port. Currently, that siding is 8,000 feet. Well, we all know that the way the train links are, we can't put a 12,000-foot train in an 8,000-foot siding. So we worked with Georgia Ports Authority along with the local development authorities to come up with a partnership to be able to use some grant money from the GPA received to extend that siding to 15,000 feet. That allows us to put multiple trains or one very long train into that siding. This siding is in the middle of nowhere. It's in a dark territory. It's not in a city. The reason why we block these crossings is because our sidings are in the middle of cities. They're in the middle of these towns. So we're looking at where can we extend sidings to be able to keep these longer trains out of these towns in some of those areas. We've used that. So that's going to be going into service around November 20th. And with the volume that we're seeing out of the port right now, that siding is going to be the primary siding that we use with the siding extension that we did 10 years ago to be able to fit these longer trains. Right now, the folks in Millen, Georgia are seeing new block crossings that they haven't seen in years because of the volume coming out of the port. I know they're calling the commissioner with complaints. I've gone down there and tried to work with them on some of these things. So this is solutions that we've started identifying years ago and privately and putting our own money in along with with partnerships of how do we anticipate that growth. So that's just one example. Once we get that siding in there at outside in Effingham County, it will alleviate the block crossings in Millen. It will alleviate the block crossings that down in Rocky Ford, Georgia, which these poor folks have one road that goes, one road that goes in and out. And when we block their crossing, they're looking at 30, 40 plus more minutes to get to hospitals, schools, and those types of things. So these are the types of infrastructure improvements that we're doing privately and to take care of some of the problems. Craig mentioned grade separations. We have a DOT that is very committed to looking at these grade separations. Russell and I were just talking yesterday about these. We are looking specifically at the line that runs between Atlanta and Birmingham. That's a major thoroughfare for us. And to be able to keep folks moving in their cars, to keep the trucks to be able to use these crossings, we need more grade separations out there in places like Bremen, Hiram, and you've got schools that are on one side of the track, and then they just can't get buses across. Hospitals, Georgia 20s on the other side of the Georgia 20s blocks some of that also. So those are kind of the areas that we're looking at. We're obviously the Hall County Intermodal, the inland port facility is one that's going to be very important to the system. I know that GPA is working very diligently to try to secure a grant to be able to fully fund that and get that one moving. That'll help a lot. Norfolk Southern's looking at the possibility of a intermodal facility south of Atlanta. So then traffic that boxes that need to be delivered in Atlanta would terminate at this location and not have to come into the trucks would not have to take it and come through Atlanta. So that's something else that we're looking at. A couple of projects that we have done and some other projects is that we have two lines, Norfolk Southern, that run from Macon to Atlanta. We have one on the west side of 75, one on the east side of 75. There was 3 bridges in Macon that were impeding us from being able to run double stack containers on the western line of Norfolk Southern. So working with GDOT, 3 bridges in Macon had to be raised about a foot. And a lot of times we had 1 foot stopping us from being able to run more container traffic down these lines. So as of, I think about 3 months ago, these bridges are complete. There's a partnership between GDOT and Norfolk Southern and the city of Macon. Those are complete. So now Norfolk Southern can run double stack containers on both of these lines. And in early next year, we will add one intermodal train to start with on that line on the west side of 75. That's going to be huge. So that's one to the port and one back every single day. So those are the types of projects that we're doing. We appreciate GDOT's support in that. And we're not here to ask for money. We're not here to look for a subsidy. We're here to continue the partnerships that we've already started with the state and then expand on those partnerships. So I'd like to just leave you all that message. You know, like Craig said, $1.6 billion is a lot of money. Georgia is extremely important to both of our railroads. So we appreciate the work y'all are doing, and thank you for your time.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have any questions, either from our online members or members that are here? All right, so having a lot of conversations with you all over the last few years on this topic, it sounds like grade separation and the maintenance of those grade crossings are the two key factors, which, again, as we look for how do we invest more in our infrastructure, that's something we need to stay focused on. Is that fair?
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, in prepping for this this meeting today, I called our general manager for our Southeast operations and said, "Hey, look, I'm going to be presenting before the Freight Logistics Commission." He's out of Waycross, by the way. And what if we had a blank check, you know, or if we were looking for something, what would we do? And the first thing he said to me was grade separate US 1.
Yeah.
That was the very first thing he said. So grade separations and the cost sharing on the grade crossings, I think, are two things that would, from a partnership standpoint, again, is the grade separations just do it all. They take care of, most importantly, safety. But again, they offer us to be more fluid, more efficient in our operations.
Yeah, we visited, this commission visited Waycross last year for one of our meetings, and we got to go out to your hump yard and see your operation there. CSX has, but we also heard the frustration of the local community, which is not the fault of CSX. It's just the fault of the business that you have to do. But the solution to that is that grade separation at US 1, which would bring huge relief to that community. But it's not an inexpensive fix.
That's correct. As a matter of fact, I was in Waycross last week meeting with the county manager, and this was one of the topics that we discussed was that. And we continue to work with all of the communities through which we operate, because we understand that sometimes it's an inconvenience. You know, when we talk about railroads, I say, look, I want to apologize for the block crossing. I want to apologize for the train horn, and I want to apologize for the grade crossing you went over that makes you feel like you need to go to the dentist and check your teeth. But the fact is that the amount of freight that we move and the amount of benefit that we provide the state, we believe overrides that. But we definitely understand that there's issues there, and grade separations would help to solve that.
I'd like to ask you all the same question I asked Mr. Vest about broadband, and is there any opportunities for you to generate revenue through your right of way on broadband, number one? And then number two, are you seeing anything around the country that you're doing in different states that we could think about here in Georgia?
Yeah, well, you know, one thing I meant to say is Brad mentioned the need for a comprehensive rail safety plan, and he mentioned two states that really have a very active rail division within their DOT, and that's Virginia and North Carolina. And that is not to say that the work that Russell's team does within their intermodal department is not good. We have a great relationship with Carol Comer and her group, and we truly believe, and I'm not saying this because his son and my son play baseball with each other, but we got the best DOT commissioner in the nation. But I would say that to fund that intermodal department is really kind of the first step in really creating a better rail plan. As I mentioned, we just upgraded the state rail plan, or working with GDOT to upgrade that plan. There's a lot that needs to be done out there. I mean, you're going to see when that plan is complete, an awful lot of suggestions to help what all of us in the room have been talking about today. With regard to broadband, as you know, Senator, we did pass a bill earlier this session, thanks to Senator Gooch and others, that would basically ensure that safety and liability is addressed in those companies that want to provide broadband service along our right of way. So we have existing contracts with the EMCs, and we'll certainly be working with them as they seek to provide broadband specifically into the rural areas. So I do see that railroad right of way will be a part of that moving forward, but just with safety and liability as the first priority. No, you want to say something?
Chairman Beach, I think that what I hear from my folks that do strategic planning and look long-term on what states do we need to have some infrastructure projects, Georgia is not on the top of the list. And I will tell you why. The gratuities clause is so complex to work with. And I know we talked about it several times, but to be able to get these partnerships in place, it takes years and years of lawyers trying to work out agreements and come up with a way to be able to do this that does show that public benefit. So the gratuities clause is a directly blocks a lot of our ability to be able to put money into Georgia a lot of times with a partnership. And so where's that money going? It's going to Pennsylvania. It's going to Virginia. It's going to Ohio. It's going to those places that where there isn't a block, there's no blocking of working, of having these partnerships. We do the partnerships here in Georgia. They just are very complex. So I would say that if there's a takeaway, that's something that really needs to be looked at.
And I would just add that as we move over the next couple of months, if you all and the short lines and others could have conversations maybe with the commissioner, both from his perspective at GDOT, his perspective on the subcommittee that we've appointed and the full commission. But what would that change look like so that we can ensure that the intent is protected, that we're using dollars not to benefit just private sector enterprise, but we're doing the investment in a way that allows us to spend taxpayer dollars for taxpayer benefit? And I do think there's a way to do that. So, and it may mean tweaking the Constitution, again, which this commission could recommend, but doing it in a way to where members, both of the public and of the General Assembly, would feel comfortable that we're still protecting with the intent. So if y'all could help us with that, we would appreciate it. All right. Any other questions? I don't see any other than, I believe, Mr. Toole, you've got one, number 10.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask, Chairman Beach had indicated that he'd like to see us get up almost double the amount of freight that's handled by rail, particularly, I assume that's a lot of that's out of the port as well. Is there, under your existing infrastructure, can you double the amount of, I mean, with the sidings you're trying, or do we need to even consider parallel tracks? How are you going to handle a double?
I think that it's not there currently to get the double on our infrastructure. Now, we're going to take it and we're going to find a place for it, but there's still going to be bottlenecks. And that's something we're working internally on. I think the Mega Rail, the Mason Yard facility, is going to greatly help that, especially when that gets online. I think it's at 25, 30, maybe 30% online right now. Norfolk Southern is actually on that part of the dock. They are about to finish the CSX part of it. By the end of 2021, I believe it will be done. And I think that you'll see, I think once they are able to sell that unit train capability out of Savannah and not have to break these trains down inland somewhere, that's going to help speed up our service from point A to point B. And I think that will naturally increase that number, Chairman Beach, from where we are right now. Does that get us to 30? It may not. And that's something that we're going to have to work on getting after a couple of years, because the port has to sell the Mega Rail. We got to remember that. They have to sell it, right? They're building it. Then they got to sell folks on it. That's their job to market that, along with our marketing folks also. So this is not a process as once the Mega Rail opens up day one, are we going to go to 30%? No. But we're going to gradually get there as they can sell that product to the consumers.
Just add one more thing on what Connor said is fitting that with the inland ports and what he just mentioned about selling it. When we opened up the inland port in Chatsworth, there was still some skepticism up in the northwest part of the state and even into Tennessee and Alabama. And is this really going to work? Is it going to be cost effective? We're starting to see that growth is really starting to pick up. So it will take some time, but I do think the Mega Rail facility coupled with these inland ports is going to help the Georgia Port Authority to expand that reach into the Mid-American arc, which is what the ultimate goal is. So I think we can get there, but there's going to have to continue to be an awful lot of investment and continued partnership with the state and with the port.
All right. Thank you very much. What I want to do is I want to introduce the next, and thank y'all for your presentation. Look forward to working with you on this gratuity clause question and other questions that we're going to have. I want to introduce the next speakers, and while they're setting up their presentation, I'm going to ask the members, we have food provided for the presenters and the members of the commission that are here over on the table along with drinks. If you would just pick that up, we're going to have a working lunch so we can continue to work. So if you would just pick that up while the presenters are getting ready. And our next presenters is going to be Robin Baggs from Home Depot. and Wes Robinson with the Georgia Chemistry Council. They're going to be talking about shipper priorities and freight rail. So while they're setting up, members, if you would grab you some lunch.
later.
Just a general announcement for the audience. Our lunch provider just told me that we had plenty. So any member of the audience who's interested in a Chick-fil-A lunch, feel free to grab one. So thank you. All right, I think we're going to try to get started. I'm going to go ahead and I believe Robin with Home Depot's first up. Is that right? All right, so we'll turn it over to you to talk about shipper priorities and freight rail. Thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Chairman Beach, Chairman Tanner. Also, a big thanks to Stephanie Smith for inviting me today. I'm pretty excited to be here. I was mentioning to Stephanie during the break, this is the first work event I've been to in person in about 6 months. So this is actually really, really exciting. So want to jump in today to a couple of things. One, just some fast facts on the Home Depot. Hopefully you all shop at the Home Depot on a regular basis. We are the world's largest home improvement retailer. Finished fiscal year 2019 with over $110 billion in sales. We have over 2,200 stores across North America, over 400,000 associates. And to zoom in a little bit on Georgia, we service about 650 of those stores through the state of Georgia. So that's a combination of product that moves through the port of Savannah, and then also a distribution network here in Georgia as well. There are 11 distribution centers that are serviced through the state of Georgia. Again, some of those are located here, and then some of those have product flowing through the port of Savannah into those distribution facilities. Want to jump into one of the company's top initiatives, One Supply Chain. Really critical initiative for our company right now. It's an over $1.2 billion investment in new supply chain infrastructure. So really large capital investment for us. There's a couple of reasons why we're making such a large investment in our supply chain right now. And I'll break it down into a couple of areas. The first is in our upstream network. We talk about our upstream as moving product from our suppliers to our distribution centers and then onto our stores. And then our downstream network, which is really anything that moves product directly to that end customer of ours. That could be through a direct fulfillment center. It could be from one of our stores. It could be from one of our suppliers, but anything that goes to that end customer. A couple of dynamics that we see right now. One is continued growth. We're obviously a large company, but we continue to grow at a very rapid clip, and we continue to need more supply chain infrastructure to handle all the goods that we need to move to our customers. The other is a changing dynamic with our customer and what they demand in terms of delivery. More than ever, and I'll speak pre-pandemic first, more than ever, customers want product delivered to their home, to their job site. You think about the pandemic and the two reasons why we're investing so heavily in our supply chain, and those needs, those demands have only been amplified. Sales are growing even faster, and the demand for delivery to the customer's home, the demand for delivery to the pro job site has only grown during the pandemic. And want to go a little bit deeper into rail and some of the investments that we're making that tie directly to rail. So we'll jump into our bulk distribution center network and our flatbed distribution center network. We have an existing BDC network. It moves a lot of big bulky goods, things like dimensional lumber, studs, plywood, OSB, roofing shingles, a lot of the things that you would find in the construction of a single family home or a remodel of a single family home. Also things like fencing and decking, things that we've seen tremendous sales this year for, and we think that will continue for quite some time. We have a very efficient existing network, but it was built many years ago. A lot of the buildings were stood up 30 years ago when we were a much smaller company, $30 billion or less in many cases. And so when you think about the size that we are now, the continued growth, we just need more space. And so one of the things that we'll be doing is we're building 30 new BDCs across the country that will be significantly larger. Another thing that is unique about this network today is historically it was stood up so long ago, we did not manage all the end-to-end transportation. So that was splintered across about 150 different suppliers handling transportation into these facilities. And going forward, we manage all of that directly, including about 50% rail. We receive about 26,000 carloads of rail into these facilities today. And as we expand them across the country, we'll become the largest receiver of forest products in the US by rail. And then finally, a really important component of these new facilities is they will enable what we call flatbed delivery. And so that'll be a flatbed truck with a Moffett or forklift on the back of that truck to go offload this really heavy, bulky product and go place it on the job site wherever the pro or the do-it-yourselfer needs it at the job site or at their home. Really excited about this and think that it offers a lot of growth in this area and with it, a lot of growth for rail. So zoom in a little bit further on Georgia. We do have a new facility of this type coming into Stonecrest, Georgia. It'll be one of our new state-of-the-art flatbed distribution centers that will combine the bulk distribution center and the flatbed delivery center component that we just talked about. Again, this is critical to enabling same day, next day delivery to that pro job site, to the customer's home. A huge portion of that freight will originate on rail directly into the BDC. We'll receive a combination of boxcar and flat car product into this facility. And really important in our mission to drive speed, efficiency, and reliability for this network. So a little bit more about what we really think about when we think about rail and we think about rail infrastructure. One is market competition. Pretty much wherever you go, there are two major Class 1 rail providers in the market. Really important that we've got great providers. We certainly have great partnerships with Norfolk Southern and CSX in the East. And that's an important component, is to make sure that we do have strong competition in that market, especially a market that doesn't have a lot of players in it. The next is connectivity. We've got product that comes in from all over the country. We have certain species that originate in the Pac Northwest that are very important to this region and the products that we sell. We have product coming in from both Eastern and Western Canada. And so we have product that's going to originate on lots of different railroads, UP and BNSF out west, CP and CN in Canada, but needs to get to our facilities here in the South and here in Georgia. Want to call out short lines. We think short lines do have an important role to play in connectivity. We will have some facilities that are served directly by Class 1. We will have some facilities that are serviced by a short line. One thing that I want to call out with short lines is I do think that connectivity to both major Class 1s in a region is really important to a Class 1, or really important to rail infrastructure. And the reason it's so important is because you may have one supplier that has product that originates on, say, Norfolk Southern, and another supplier that has product that originates on CSX. The ability to connect to both of those Class 1s is really important to maximize the amount of product you can bring in on rail. If you have a mismatch where, let's say, product originates on Norfolk Southern and then your distribution center is, say, serviced by CSX, the economics oftentimes start to break down, and you'll see more and more product flip from rail to truck. And there's a couple of things that play into that, but they are ultimately speed to customer. We have to have product moving fast through our network, and it has to be reliable and predictable as it moves through our network, and making sure that that connectivity is there, that ensures it's moving as fast as possible, and doesn't have the high spikes and variability that you sometimes see with rail. Really important components for us. And two of the things that make truck very competitive against rail: speed and predictability. And so as we think about where we place facilities, these are all the things that we think about. How do we connect to the product that we're trying to get? How do we move it there as fast as we can? How do we make sure it's predictable and reliable, so that when we're setting up a delivery to a pro job site or to a customer's home, we can say with much accuracy and confidence that the product's going to get there when we need it. So I'll kind of close out here a couple of things that we've hit today. One supply chain is a huge investment for us, and it does present a tremendous opportunity for growth in our rail network. The next is that rail infrastructure is really critical to our business today. We're a very large intermodal shipper. We do about 130,000 intermodal shipments per year. We're a very large carload shipper, about 26,000 carloads per year. That all has the potential to grow as we continue to see rail infrastructure move product faster on the rail and reduce variability on the rail. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any questions? I know you'll be around till the end of the presentation, but any questions now? I don't see any. We've appreciated having your colleague. Can you mash your button there just so I'll know which one? All right, Commissioner.
Thank you. Just a question. The speed of the customer is obviously key. Have you seen any changes now with the trends due to COVID and impact? Is there more need for more warehousing than you might have had in the past, just again, as the sort of market demand has changed? Is that something you're seeing, or is this, again, sort of just in time deliveries sort of the focus?
Yeah, no, the warehousing space needed, the demand for that has definitely grown. Some of the things that we've shared are tremendous growth across the business, but we've also highlighted that our D21, which is our lumber department, has been one of the fastest growing areas in the entire company. You think about folks spending so much time at home. Fencing has been absolutely huge. We all love our neighbors, but when you're in the backyard more now than ever before, you might not want to have to talk to them every single time you go out there. Decking has really exploded, and then remodeling at our customer's home has really exploded as well. We're also seeing really high demand for our products from the pro, and so tremendous growth. And with that, you need more warehousing, you need more space. We've done some creative things. One of the nice things about our strategy is that it did match up so nicely to COVID dynamics. And so we were already adding significant square footage to our new facilities. We can't get them fast enough. We can't stand them up fast enough. To give an example, our first flatbed distribution center, we went from about 250,000 square feet in that market to over 800,000 under roof. And there's a lot of outdoor storage in this network as well. So it went to ultimately over 1 million square feet. And so you think about that jump. That's kind of the jump that we were already planning on making. And we certainly can't wait to have that additional space.
Thank you.
Okay, I think it's working. So Robin, you did talk a lot about the growth in rail freight as it relates to forest products, which is growing enormously. We do also have a fair amount of intermodal that we do as well.
Yeah.
And we do rail from Savannah to Birmingham, up to South Carolina, a few other locations. One of the questions that Chairman Beach asked earlier around why we don't do more rail. A lot of it, I think, is length of haul. And we were having a good conversation the other day around, we have a lot of facilities in Henry County, and we don't rail there because if we did, we'd have to go from the port into the city center of Atlanta, offload to a truck, come back through traffic. So it just economically doesn't make sense. So one thing I think we should think about as a commission is think about where we have all the incentives and where distribution growth is in the state of Georgia, and trying to align incentives for the rail to grow there as well. So that there's that infrastructure aligns.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, is especially on the intermodal side of the house, that kind of last mile, we'll call it, getting from the final destination rail yard to your facility is really important, because it really doesn't matter how fast it gets to the rail yard. It has to get to our distribution center before we can use it. And so really critical if we're fighting unnecessary traffic, or we're kind of doubling back where you go past your final destination and then turn around to come back to it. It is a relatively easy move from the Port of Savannah to our major facilities south of the Metro Atlanta area, and so that is definitely a consideration. And the faster and more reliable we can make that piece of it, the more we would move by rail from the Port of Savannah to our Atlanta facilities.
Thank you. And when you're talking to the commodities traders and the manufacturers, ask them to bring lumber prices down a little bit, because $24 a sheet for OSB is a little extreme, but I know that's Stephanie's fault. So we'll talk to her about that. Representative Rutledge, I believe you have a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If there was an inland port in McDonough, Henry County, how much volume would you move there?
Yeah, I don't have an exact number that I could share there, but I will say this. The Port of Savannah is one of our most important ports in the entire country. About a quarter of all of our products move through the Port of Savannah. And so the more that we invest into connectivity from the port out via rail, there's tremendous opportunity for us to move product via rail out of the Port of Savannah.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
All right. Wes Robinson with the Georgia Chemistry Council's next up.
Let me just use these to go. Next slide.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Wes Robinson. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Chemistry Council. And for those of you that aren't familiar with us, we're the trade association that represents businesses in the business of chemistry. About a $13 billion industry here in Georgia. And our products, they go in about 96% of all manufactured goods. And so we ship a lot of product, millions of carloads nationally, and certainly a lot here in Georgia. And first, I really need to give a plug just because of the great teamwork that we've seen during the pandemic. A lot of our manufacturers are making the disinfectants, the cleaning products, the PPE that have been essential to fighting this pandemic. And it's just been a great partnership with the Class 1s, with the short line guys, certainly with y'all and with the federal regulatory agencies as well. And so they've kept those products moving on time. They've kept them going. Our manufacturers have been able to continue to produce those products, and we're thankful for that partnership. But I wanted to go back to share screen. Let's see. Excuse me. Highlight some of the shipper priorities. And really they boil down to three things: safety, reliability, and affordability. Obviously, safety is number one to us. It's number one to the railroads. Both them and us have robust emergency response plans. And, hazmat accidents have really declined significantly since the passage of the Staggers Act, over 91%. And those shipments arrive 99.99% of the time safely. I will say, just in communicating with some of our member companies throughout the state in preparation for this meeting, there have been a couple washouts. So, some of our members did ask for just a continuous review of the tracks in the state to make sure that they do remain safe. So those products can continue to move and to do so safely. One of the biggest issues that we're having is, something that Robin kind of touched on too, is most shippers lack competitive access to rail. Over 70% of our members are what's known as captive shippers. So we have access to just one railroad. And so what we see, and that's a map that highlights the percentage of captive shippers by region. And so what we're seeing is that we really need freight reform now, because when the Staggers Act was first passed, the rail industry was different. There's a lot more railroads. Now it's consolidated to just a small number where you've got 4 handling about 90% of freight. And since about 2000, most of that consolidation has happened. We've seen the rates increase. They far outpace the rate increases that we see in trucking. They outpace inflation. And they've just continued to rise at a pretty exponential growth, as you can see there on the chart. And that's an analysis of data from the Association of American Railroads. And so not only have rates continued to increase, but also there's not a great ability to challenge those rates when you're only dealing with one railroad. So you would petition the Surface Transportation Board, but in 40 years since Staggers Act has passed, we haven't had a single carload shipper been successful in a rate case. And STB said that most of those cases take an average of 5 years and cost $5 million. So it's really challenging to bring those cases forward. And so that's a challenge that we're having. Most of those are at the federal level. So, just wanted to kind of mention that, put that on your radar. We do think that there are a number of policies that they're considering that would be a great thing for manufacturers and for rail customers. But bottom line is we need more competitiveness, and not all of that's about rate. Some of it's things like competitive switching. It's streamlined policies with STB to be able to bring those rate cases forward in an efficient and effective manner. And then certainly the rates as well. So that's it. I really just want to put that on your radar. Most of the issues are federal. Our guys think that, rail in Georgia is really doing pretty well. Certainly we have bottleneck issues. Certainly we have delay issues, but the Class 1 and the short rail guys really work hard to mitigate those. I will say, I think it was Mr. Tarbutton that was speaking to the short rail tax credits. That's something that we're certainly supportive of, and like to see and would be supportive of seeing that extended again, both at the state level and the federal level. We're very excited to hear about some of the grade crossing projects that the Class 1 guys mentioned, and it really is a good partnership. But like I said, as the industry has changed, we think the policies need to change as well, as it's not the same industry as it was 40 years ago when the Staggers Act was first passed. And so that will basically conclude the remarks I wanted to leave with you. You're welcome to contact me if there's any information that I can provide. And we really just appreciate being part of this conversation. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Any questions? All right. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next up, we've got 2 presenters. Both are with Smith, Gamble, and Russell, and one, I believe, will be presenting in person, and one will be presenting online. So Mark de St. Alban is here, I believe, in person, and Joe Mandarino is here online. So we'll give Madison and Chelsea just a moment to set up the presentation, and we'll turn it over to them. Thank you for being here, and the floor is yours when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman Tanner. Give me 1 minute. How do I check to make sure that my partner is with us remotely?
One of the things that can be somewhat challenging is when I click on his audio, it turns our audio off. So I will see if he's online. I'm going to click over. So Joe Mandarino, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me? Is the audio coming through?
All right, we'll give him just a second.
Okay, is it coming through now?
All right, the challenge from a technological standpoint, I've been told by the experts, is that because y'all have shared the screen, both of you we were not going to be able to hear him until you're finished and the screen's no longer shared. Am I correct?
So basically, we can't have him and you talking at the same time. You have to talk and then he has to talk. Is it? Okay.
I'm going to start. Joe's going to speak.
Right. Okay, that's fine. Right.
Yeah.
Just let us know when he's ready to talk.
I sure will.
And what'll happen is the screen will no longer be shared. So we'll just have to deal with that to get through it. So.
Okay.
All right, go ahead. Thank you.
I'm sure we'll work it out. Yes, good afternoon, and thank you. Chairman Tanner, Chairman Beach, members of the committee, thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here. My name is Mark D. St. Aubin. I'm with the law firm of Smith, Gambrell, and Russell. Joining me today is my partner, Joe Mandarino. I head up the construction group at Smith Gambrell, a firm that's grown up here in Atlanta and around Georgia for over 125 years. And in the construction group, we deal with all nature of capital improvements, public and private. My partner, Joe, works in our corporate and tax group. We're both here today to speak on the subject of what's been titled Economic Impediments to PFI. A couple other introductory comments. I also wanted to mention Brad Skinner, who spoke earlier in the day and who's a member of this committee. He's heading the Public-Private Partnership Subcommittee to the Georgia Freight and Logistics Commission. And we've already been working together. So some of the ideas that you'll hear today are based on my conversations with Brad and that subcommittee. And of course, the Georgia Chamber has been very involved in that and done a great job. And done a great job generally in giving those advocating private involvement in public infrastructure in Georgia an opportunity to be heard. Unwrapping the title a little bit, impediments to economic development in PFI, what we're really talking in the most general way about is keeping Georgia competitive. And we do view the involvement of the private sector in Georgia's infrastructure as a Georgia competitive issue. And as for PFI, that is simply private financing of infrastructure. The term that we're all a little bit more used to is public-private partnerships, and we'll use that term during the course of the presentation. There are two large buckets of impediments when folks from private firms outside the state or within the state look to do infrastructure on a public-private basis in Georgia. And the first I'll address a little bit more briefly than Joe will, and that's the method of procurement or the methodology for the state doing business when it comes to public-private partnerships. And that's very important. All of this is useful to look at, not to be exclusively looked at, but useful to look at from the vantage point of those who are now involved in the development of public infrastructure, in Colorado, Florida, California, Maryland, Virginia. And as they come around to a state like Georgia, how do they size it up? How easy is it to do business? And can they dedicate their dollars, their expertise, their state-of-the-art ideas for improved and enhanced infrastructure? So I think I'm going to go back up. These are not all of my slides, but that's all right. Let me stay away from the slides for just a sec. I'll check one more time. No. Okay. So already in the state of Georgia, we build our infrastructure with private entities. The public entity contracts with an architect to design a school building. They contract with a contractor to then take those plans and specifications and complete that school facility. All right. And then once the warranty period is expired, the asset is managed and operated by the school district. Now, when we talk about public-private partnerships, all we're talking about is expanding the role played by the private party in the life cycle of that asset. In the conventional method of delivery, the public entity finances, it operates it, and it maintains it. When we talk about a public-private partnership, we give the private side more involvement in the financing, in the maintenance, perhaps even in the operations. And the full version of public-private partnerships is the design, construction or building, financing, maintenance, and operation of public assets. But as we've seen here in the state of Georgia, with a lot of DOT projects, there are limited versions of that, simply design, build, finance. And I'm going to talk more about what GDOT has done with the asset, with the infrastructure it oversees towards the end of the presentation, because it's, in my view, a model for how to take a well thought out, deliberate, programmatic approach to alternative methods of project delivery. PPP, public-private partnerships, P3, such a loaded term. Everybody instantly has a reflexive, either negative or positive response to that. Just always want to eliminate a couple of misconceptions. Ownership of the asset is never transferred to the private entity. That's privatization. Ownership's always retained by the public entity. What is transferred is that risk of some element of financing, perhaps all of the financing, and the maintenance and the operations. That's what's transferred to the private side. And again, keep in mind, we already transfer the risk for adequate design and for adequate and good standards of good construction to the private side. So we're simply expanding on that. But what really makes public-private partnerships different are these two things. The contracts for the private entity's involvement go from a very short period of time to an extremely lengthy period of time, 30 to 50 year concession agreements. And that's new and that's different. The second is the public entity's ability to control the risks that it's handed over to the private side are accomplished or achieved in a contract with that private entity. So that contract becomes a very complex document. Not just the deal, not just the corporate terms, the impediments to which Joe's going to address in a minute in the state of Georgia can be challenging. But the contract that goes with that requires advisors. It is a lengthy and it's a cumbersome process, and it requires a lot of education on the public side, and it also requires a lot of transparency so that the private side understands how quickly they can get to close, financial close, and how quickly they can get a project up and running. So that highlights a couple of what I'd refer to as the procurement impediments in this new way of doing business, but something that particularly when you're dealing with a specific asset type in the freight and logistics area, that the state leaders will entertain. Let me turn it over to Joe. So I'll now be quieting down, and Joe will be talking about some constitutional and statutory limitations on what the public body can do in Georgia.
Great.
Get that out of your way.
That's okay.
Okay, so I think you're switching over audio for me.
All right, Joe, are you with us?
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Test, test.
While Chelsea's working on that, let me just also say that all the presentations that's been presented today, both online and in person, will be emailed out to all the members of the commission. So members online or members that are here have not been able to see a PowerPoint. Chelsea will send that out to you so you'll have all of that. All right, I think we're ready to go. Joe, are you with us?
Yes. Can you guys hear me? Is that coming through?
Joe, we're not able to hear you. Can you check it on your end? We see that you are talking and can hear us.
Okay, let me try. Is that coming through now?
Can you hear us?
I can hear you guys. Can you hear me? Are you able to hear me
We
now?
have media services coming up to see if they can help us. And the folks who are online can actually hear him. So they can. Our members who are online can hear him. It's just we're not able to hear him here.
If I may, I told you we were going to go to Joe and come back to me. I can do my part.
That'd be great. Thank you
and
for doing that.
Try to
for
keep us on schedule.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So it does dovetail nicely with what Joe was about to say. But in any event, the point can be made. I think what you ultimately strive for, whether you're looking at a dedicated space of asset or infrastructure, or whether you're looking generally, is to achieve in a particular state, your way of doing business, what we call the Georgia way of doing business. I remember being at a dinner and hearing the Maryland Department of Transportation Commissioner talking about we're really getting comfortable with the idea of how we do it in Maryland. And that's useful, of course, for all the folks on the public side who need to negotiate and make sure that they're getting a good deal, who need to trust their advisors and understand the advice that they're giving. And of course, on the private side, they know what to expect. They know what to expect. And I think a great model for how to develop that predictable way of procuring these projects is the Georgia Department of Transportation's public-private partnership program. The enabling legislation finally effective in 2009, which laid the groundwork, the rules well thought out, published shortly thereafter, and then the public-private partnership program within GDOT taking additional steps by producing guidelines, publishing, and I think the project manual is still underway. But the publication of this basic statement of what we're looking for, how we do business, what the procurement methodology is extremely helpful to folks on the private side who very much want to bring their latest and greatest ideas for automated people movers from the car rental facility directly to the airport if they happen to be off site, or for some inland port facility. But because their biggest cost is really that time between project conception and getting to financial close. So I hope we got Joe online and I can bounce out of the way and let him chat.
All right, Joe, we got you.
Okay, can you guys hear me now? Is the audio coming through?
It is remotely. This is Brad Skinner.
Hmm. Would it, I don't know if the IT people can hear me, but would it make sense to call in?
No, we got you now. Go ahead.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. Technology is great. Well, it's probably just as well that we jump the order around a little. We're going to try to just go through some of the topics that are in that outline. And really just to step back, one of the problems with the private interface with public infrastructure in our country generally is that there were a bunch of rules put in as a result of the Gilded Age abuses in the 1800s that made their way into state constitutions. Some of them withered on the vine, some of them morphed their own lives. And one in particular, we'll talk about the gratuities clause, is really meant to address political corruption, but is probably used by people in a way that maybe literally makes sense, but can often be an impediment. So that's sort of the high level. We'll get on to some of the specific categories. And again, we're trying to stay at a general level. And one of the first ones that you run into is that Georgia has a rule that basically says one generation can't burden another. So this is the binding successors in office rule. And it is a statutory construction, but there's been a lot of common law developed. It generally means that you cannot have a long-term contract with a state or local government. 10 years is probably tops. Some cases have said that that's okay. But there are 4 large exceptions to this. And there is an exception for a state or city or county being able to contract on a longer term with respect to its own proprietary functions. And some of the carve outs are statutory, which I think gives you, some options there. There are 4 infrastructure carve outs, including one for the one that Mark mentioned with GDOT and CERTA. Another restriction that we run into is there's a bar on joint ownership between the state and private property, private parties. That's usually held to involve ownership, directly of the same piece of property, like a joint venture. It could also mean shareholders in the same corporation. But here we're talking about private corporations, not a public corporation. That generally violates the Georgia Constitution, but there has been some case law that would suggest that leases, the lessor or lessee relationship is not a problem, and some other relationships that are ways to divide property. Another restriction we run into is sometimes called the Pledge of Credit Clause. This is in the Constitution, and there are slightly different versions that apply on the state and local level. On the state level, it's basically a rule that you can't contract with a private property for funds that are not on hand at the time of the contract, or where the performance of the state agency would depend on a future appropriation. So it's similar in some ways to that successor in office rule. If you enter into a concession contract with a private party, you have to make sure that there's been no debt or pledge of credit. And again, this is sort of a roundabout way of saying, you cannot burden future debt offerings or cause a future debt offering of the state of Georgia in that fashion. So there's a similar one for local authorities. There tends to be some more specific. So you generally cannot incur debt that's greater than 10% of your tax base. You need voter approval. But those rules have been held not to apply to limited recourse obligations. And then you get into this issue about if you're leasing property by a local authority to a private property, probably you can go 35 years. But if you go beyond that, which most private finance arrangements would seek, that typically won't be allowed. The gratuities clause is something that we run into fairly often. It is a function of the Constitution, so it applies to all levels of government, and if there is basically it's triggered that if the state gives, a state or our government gives away something gratuitously, then that's a violation and it can be undone. There is case law that if the state receives a substantial benefit in exchange for something that it gives away, that should be okay. And the US Supreme Court, in a case maybe relevant to today's hearing, actually ruled on whether the state of Georgia could grant an easement to a private railroad on the basis that the railroad was going to build a new line that would benefit the state of Georgia. And the US Supreme Court said that is fine. That's a substantial benefit, and that in itself should not be a violation that this clause was meant to block. And in many cases, you can argue that the gratuities clause was meant to block a type of transactional corruption that often, when it's used or threatened to be used, or where we're worried about being used, it doesn't really rise to that level. Another impediment that you have in Georgia is sometimes called the prohibited contracts clause. So you cannot have the state enter into a contract between, or one agency enter into a contract with another one if that contract is intended as a security for bonds or debt to be issued by an agency. That gets a little bit hyper-technical, but it does kind of segue into intergovernmental agreements, which may be the way to solve some of these things. I think Mark kind of talked a little bit about the DOT infrastructure program. That is basically a super hyper intergovernmental agreement, IGA. The Georgia Constitution specifically allows contracts between agencies that do not exceed 50 years. And I'll talk a little, I hate to cite cases, but there was a case in 2003 that specifically dealt with the State Road and Toll Authority that was created as an intergovernmental agency. And there were specific complaints that arrangement violated the pledge clause, the debt clause, the gratuities clause, and some of the other things we've talked about. And every single one of those obstacles, the Georgia Supreme Court said, no, it doesn't, it's allowed, or we construe this limitation in such a way that IGA was allowed. And you'll find that to the extent that there is any public-private interaction in Georgia, oftentimes we use IGAs because they are held to overcome the obstacles that we went through, all the debt, the pledge, the successor in office rules, and the gratuities clause. So with that, I think I'm pretty much on time, and maybe this is a good time to quit while we're ahead, or take questions, or however you want to turn at this point.
All right, thank you very much. And I appreciate you being patient with us as we try to work out these issues from technology. One of the things, and I know, Mark, you hit on this, that y'all have been working with the subcommittee and working with Mr. Skinner and trying to flesh out some of these ideas of what this would actually look like as far as changes that needed to be made to remove some of the impediments to this public-private partnership opportunities that may be out there. Is that something that you feel like that y'all will continue to work through, so when the subcommittee brings forward a report, that we'll be able to have that in a way that this commission will be able to take a look at what recommendations we want to take from that and what changes need to specifically be made, either to the code or even constitutionally?
Yes, I think that's correct. Of course, I defer to Mr. Skinner, but we are certainly looking at those issues and heading in that direction. Whether certain existing statutory limitations or constitutional provisions require modification or amendment. And then, are there solutions out there, since I'm not tipping our hand, it's not something that's been thought out, Chairman Tanner, but you can already see how CERTA works in connection with GDOT around a specific type of infrastructure. And you can see how another properly legislatively authorized authority might operate with respect to a unique class of assets in a similar fashion. And I only raise that because I think about the timing. If you think about the runway from GDOT getting started with its P3 program to where it is right now, and the long list of projects it has on it has in the queue, it takes some time, regardless of which direction you go. So understanding this is a critical need, and Georgia is all about freight and logistics, we'll be looking not only at what policy considerations should be made, but also how that gets down to what can allow us to do business sooner rather than later, if that's the desire of the General Assembly and folks in the state who are interested in seeing if we can find more infrastructure, which everybody seems to need, and improving infrastructure that's suffered deferred maintenance for decades. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Any other questions from anyone online or from any member of the commission that's here? All right, I believe we have one from Tom Gale that's online. Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just make a request to you and Co-Chairman Beach. If there are going to be continued discussions about changing the gratuities clause, changing some of the obstacles to public-private partnerships, considering that Dave Wills and myself represent city and county governments, we'd like to be looped into those conversations because of the implications to the first P in the P3 dynamic. So I would just make a request that we try to be looped into those discussions moving forward.
Thanks, Tom. And I'll just ask Mr. Skinner, I think he's still with us online, if he would keep that in mind as we move the subcommittee forward over the next month and a half, if you would have those conversations with Dave and Tom from local government perspective.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? One of the things I'll ask too, Mark, because I know there's been conversation and there's been people that's attempted to work around the gratuity clause. It's my understanding that can prove to be very costly of an endeavor to try to maneuver around the gratuities clause as it sits today. Have you had any experience with that?
Let me make sure I understand your question, Chairman Tanner. You're talking about the cost and expense of the constitutional amendment creating another exception?
No, it's there's been some attempts to have that direct investment from the state when you run up against the gratuities clause. I know some of our rail folks and others have looked at that, but it's proven to be fairly expensive from a legal perspective to create this coalition, public-private partnership, or instead of having that direct route to be able to fund and operate, it's kind of unclear territory, I guess is my point.
Yes. And one thing Joe and I were talking about a little earlier today when we were preparing for this is, the gratuities clause is always going to be looked at by the courts in the context of what it was originally set out to accomplish, and that was anti-corruption. And now to create an exception to that, we want to, use it to incentivize private investment so that when it's appropriate to do so, of course, so that we can do more deals. It strikes me in some ways as a unique starting place in that one regard. I think private, and again, this is how we look at it, private folks coming in from the outside say, well, we don't have this issue with the gratuities clause, or we have this exception that's well defined. So there's an issue on the one hand of contextualizing it and making sure that people understand what the exception would mean. And if I'm getting to my point correctly, I think that's going to create a little skepticism potentially around, if I'm a private firm, is this really going to withstand scrutiny? Again, we're always getting back to how predictable is the runway to getting the deal done? And I think that's something important for the committee to think about. Could that be a useful tool? Yes. In and of itself, is it going to be maybe the only tool that's needed in the toolbox? It's not the only tool that's needed in the toolbox. Finally, are the workarounds going to be costly? Certainly.
All right.
And there's and that's the answer to your question. Certainly. And that is going to deter, that band of folks that travels from Colorado to California to wherever, to everyone not landing here in Georgia.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the key to this is we're on a competitive basis with all other states. And if we make it difficult for those arrangements to be put in place, it's going to put us at a disadvantage. So thank you very much, and look forward to you continuing to work with the subcommittee and bring forward some good recommendations. Any other questions before we move forward? All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chairman Tanner. Thanks
Thank
everybody
you.
on the committee.
All right, our last presentation is going to come all online, so I think we're ready to go with that. We got Tom Gale, who's again a member of our commission. He's with GMA. We have Lee Beckman, who's with the Georgia Ports Authority, and we have Dave Wills, who is the executive director of ACCG, also a member of the commission. So, gentlemen, thank you for being here and for working with us. Both behind the scenes and in this commission over the last 2 years. So I'll turn it over to the three of you. Tom, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I guess I will kick it off, and Chairman Beach has asked that I try to be brief, so I will do that. I know the hour is getting late. I just want to make 3 points to the commission. One, cities have identified tremendous amount of capital needs for the next 5 years. The largest category of capital needs investments are water and wastewater, but very close on the heels is transportation infrastructure. And city and county governments with broad public support are providing significant funding to meet these needs. The other thing I wanted to mention to you is we're concerned about revenue in the midst of this pandemic to pay for capital investments and services. It's a real concern for local governments, and especially with the inaction in Washington over a potential next round of federal stimulus. We're concerned that revenues will continue to decline into next year. And then we've touched on it a little bit, but truck traffic has a lot of impact on our communities across the state. Infrastructure impacts from heavy trucks has an impact. And then we've talked about grade separations, but definitely train traffic is becoming more problematic. I submitted a couple of slides to you, and we can, I think Abby or someone has put them in your folder, so we can skip showing them, but I'll give you just the gist of it. GMA surveys our members every 5 years or so to find out their capital needs. We project that Georgia cities will need approximately $20 billion for capital projects over the next 5 years. And excluding the city of Atlanta, which is a large part of that amount, the cities that we surveyed, we've made a projection that $12.14 billion in capital needs will be needed for the rest of the cities across the state in the next 5 years. And of course, while local governments would love to have state and federal help and partnership in meeting these capital needs, local governments and their taxpayers are constantly supportive of infrastructure investments. We make massive investments. You all know that SPLOSTs are hugely popular with passage rates over 90% across the state. It's safe to say that all SPLOSTs have a significant amount of transportation projects in addition to the other projects. Just last year, $1.27 billion in revenues were generated from SPLOSTs across the state. Also, 4 regions in the state have decided to make significant investments by asking their citizens to embrace a Transportation Investment Act tax. To date, that has brought in over $1.23 billion for transportation in those 4 regions. And then in the 2015 legislative session, when House Bill 170 passed to give the state an infusion of funds, a part of that was the authorization for counties and cities to work together collaboratively and pass a single county T-SPLOST. Well, in just that short amount of time, we've had 28 counties and cities move forward and pass single county T-SPLOST, generating $668 million for transportation in those 28 counties. So we are meeting those significant needs, and but revenue shortfalls again are a concern. Right now, property tax has been fairly stable, but sales taxes are down 15% in the first 2 quarters of this year. We're hoping to see an uptick in those, but we still are nervous. As an example, City of Savannah last week had a meeting and they're projecting a $4 million deficit due to hotel motel tax declines and also sales tax declines, but that's happening all over the state. And then last but not least, so our cities and our biggest member, the City of Atlanta, fully understand the importance of freight and logistics. For example, in our capital city, Mayor Bottoms knows that transportation and logistics jobs are critical to her One Atlanta strategy. And most of these jobs are providing access to a strong wage. Last year, when we met in Waycross, we heard from the general manager of Hartsfield-Jackson, and we know that aviation is a component in moving freight. GDOT recently finished its work on the statewide economic aviation impact study, and the state's 103 publicly owned airports contribute immensely to our state's economy. They generate $73.7 billion in economic benefit to the state, support 450,000 jobs, and a payroll of $20 million. And in addition, looking at strengthening those aviation hubs, those general aviation hubs across the state is very important, not just for Hartsfield-Jackson, which is important, but all of those others. And then trucks and rail are important, but the impacts, we've heard them already. Truck parking, truck transfer areas produce significant traffic. We've had many municipal residents across the state frustrated by commercial trucks using residential streets. And then as the thought for development of inland ports like the one in Hall County are looked at, we need to make sure that GDOT, in doing the great work to plan for the impact on interchanges and arterials, that they partner closely with schools and local governments to analyze those. And then lastly, on grade separations, I think Commissioner McMurray threw out the number of what it would take just to do grade separations for the 2 Class 1 railroads in Georgia. It's significant, but that could solve a lot of the rail problems and also some of the congestion problems in communities across the state. So I was very quick and appreciate you having us present today.
All right, thank you very much, Tom. And next, we'll go with Lee Beckman. Lee.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Mr. Chairman, Tanner and Beach, we appreciate all y'all are doing, from a lot of our customers throughout this time and a lot of our partners as well. I do have a presentation I'd like to share. So I'm going to hit share screen. And hopefully this will work for you guys. Can y'all see that okay?
Yes, we got it good.
Okay. So our facilities in Savannah and Brunswick, we just recently released a study that was done based on fiscal 2019 numbers. You'll see the jobs impacts, the economic impact throughout the state. We'll be remiss in not, making sure y'all see this for our friends in the cities and the counties. We can break those down by county so that they can see the impacts that we have on the different communities throughout the state. But we're very excited to see significant growth in just a 2-year period based compared to fiscal 17 in terms of our impacts. When looking at our year-over-year growth at the Port of Savannah, last year was an interesting year, not to say the least. We did see a slight decline in terms of total containers, a slight increase in terms of total tonnage. You will see that auto and machinery units saw a more significant decrease year over year. Rail held pretty steady. And then our facility up in Chatsworth saw significant increases, almost 270% increase year over year. And we're actually seeing increases this year through the first quarter. We saw a 75% year over year increase, moving 16,500 TEUs in the first quarter of this fiscal year. So we're very excited about what's going on up there. And in fact, we're also looking to expand that facility in the very near future. When looking at the impacts that COVID has had on our throughput, if you look at the last 5 quarters, including the entirety of last fiscal year and the first quarter of this fiscal year, you'll see that through February, we were looking at a 4% year-over-year growth on top of a calendar, a record year in fiscal 19. And then March happened and the shutdown happened and saw a 10.6% decline during that last 4-month period of the fiscal year. The first 2 months, that decline was largely due to access to supplies. The demand was still there, but many of the factories overseas shut down, and we weren't able to get cargo from them to us. The latter half, May and June, April, May, and June, you saw a decline in demand here in the United States, which continued that. We are encouraged that this fiscal year, we've seen a slight growth over last year, which was at a record pace at this point. July, our first month of the fiscal year, we saw a 6% decline. August was actually a record month of all time. And so it was a slight increase over last year's record, which was August. And then September saw a sharp increase over last year, and it gave us the highest or the most cargo for a September ever. Now, we can't expect to see these numbers stay like that throughout the year, but we are encouraged that the first quarter has looked this good. In fact, we moved 1.2 million TEUs in the first quarter, which is roughly the equivalent of what we moved through the entirety of 2003. So we've seen a lot of growth. When you look at the fiscal year compared to other peer ports, you'll see that many of our peers did see significant declines. Savannah became the slowest declining of those ports at negative 0.9% compared to others. And there are a number of factors as to why we were able to be more resilient in the face of COVID than other facilities. First and foremost, some of our operational improvements and our operational changes, we went to a isolate and operate type of attack. And what that meant was we were putting employees on specific equipment so that if someone on that equipment were to contract COVID, then we knew we could minimize the number of people who were going to be touched by that. And so in doing so, we've seen a really, really small number of our employees impacted by COVID, and we've continued in that measure. We're also making sure to clean and spray our equipment regularly and work with our friends in the unions and in the trucking and rail industries to make sure that they're also doing things safely so that it doesn't find its way into our facility. You know, when you think about a post-COVID environment, Savannah is the most connected port globally in the United States, as recognized by the UNCTAD Connectivity Index. And so when things are impacted by the markets that we serve, whether they are domestic or international, they do impact our business. And so when you look at where we touch throughout the world, we've got to be cognizant of what's going on there and how it might impact our industry. Another thing that's helped to drive our growth during this time is our rail operations. We talked a lot about rail operations today. When we move cargo through our facility via rail, we have significantly reduced the amount of time it stays on terminal. We have a 1, 2, 3 goal that we have, and that 1, 2, 3 means 1 day on terminal and onto the rail, 2 days to most markets, with the exception of like a market like Chicago. And on day 3, our customers have their cargo or are picking up their cargo. The Mega Rail project that we've talked a lot about today is getting closer to completion every day. The first bundle of 9 tracks is operational. Our friends in Norfolk Southern are currently using that. And the second bundle is under construction. At full build out, we'll have 85,000 additional feet of track on our terminal. And we'll be able to accommodate 6 10,000 TE or 10,000 foot trains at the same time. So we are working diligently to expand our operations. And the demand has continued to be there for a number of reasons. You know, when you look at the market that we're looking to serve, you are seeing a lot of changes. You heard from Home Depot about how e-commerce and how the new demands of the post-COVID economy is impacting how they move cargo. We'll think about all the other customers that we have, like Home Depot, that are also looking at how they're going to be impacted by the new demands of a post-COVID environment. So accessing these markets becomes more important. And so we want to be the port of choice for the eastern third of the United States. When you look at how we can access those markets like Memphis, like Chicago, we are much closer than our competitors out on the West Coast, and we want to be their first port of choice. Before I finish up, I did want to give you all a quick update on SHEP. We are 75% complete today. Plan to be finished by the end of next year, beginning of 2022. And there are 2 deepening dredges in the river right now, along with 2 maintenance dredges at the same time. We're very excited about that final completion in the very near future. And I would also be remiss not to mention our friends at Georgia DOT and all the projects that they've had for over the roads leading to and from our facility to help us gain better access into and out of our state via truck. This list does not include the major mobility projects at I-95 and I-16 and the additional lanes of traffic on I-16 into Savannah as well. So a lot of these projects and a lot of these improvements are going to help us better serve the customers and the communities that rely on access to world markets, whether that is agricultural products, manufacturing products, or retail goods. We are the #1 exporting port in the nation, the #1 ag exporting port in the nation as well. And we could not have done that without y'all's help, without the GDOT's help, and without the help of our friends in our federal delegation.
All right, Lee, thank you very much. We appreciate all the work Georgia Ports continue to do. Next up is Dave Wills, Executive Director of ACCG. Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it very much. What I've chosen to do is to focus on the title, which is Georgia Transportation Post-COVID, and make some comments that are derived from my county focus. And so nobody yet knows what it means to be post-COVID. We're all assuming there's going to be a vaccine, but we don't know when that's going to be available, how long it would take to get it out and everybody get vaccinated. And if we don't get a vaccine, then how long does that take? So those things in place, it leaves a degree of uncertainty in the minds of local government officials, specifically with respect to financial capacity and whether they are willing to make short or long-term commitments to infrastructure projects. So I think that any work that this committee would conclude needs to probably factor in at least some lag time on the front end for the funding of projects, because nobody, or at least presumably very few people, will be willing to make those kind of long-term commitments until we understand what our financial modeling looks like. Another thing that's critically important from my perspective is the local maintenance improvement grant program. So we know that that's funded by not less than 10 and not more than 20% of the preceding motor fuel years collections. And so when we look at the state's fiscal years, we know we're going to have at least 2 years of impact in reduced motor fuel sales taxes and the amount of money that would come to counties and cities to be spent on transportation projects. So that's important. Tom made mention about SPLOST and T-SPLOST. I think we have to figure what's the impact there. And I think it's very likely that we could see a lag depending upon what happens next week in the elections. If there continues to remain a divided Congress and there's no major stimulus bill that's forthcoming, we could see some declining revenues that follow. What we've actually saw was an uptick with the big stimulus that came out early on. And so some counties actually saw revenues go up, not down. But now that we don't have that same amount of money flowing into the economy, I think we've got to consider that and pair that up with the willingness or lack thereof of the voters to continue to approve these in uncertain times. I think another thing that the committee needs to consider, and there's got to be some study put into this, but I believe we're going to see a disparate impact around the state from COVID. I believe that in the metropolitan centers, particularly in convention and tourism centers like Atlanta, Savannah, Brunswick, the Golden Isles, like Tom's already mentioned about hotel, motel taxes being down, some of those jurisdictions are likely to suffer a greater decline in revenue than will some of the more agrarian economies around the state where you've got ag and forestry that are the primary industries. They have not suffered the same way that some of our more metropolitan centers have. So we need to take a look at that data. Next to last point is about the changes that have taken place in the way that we're working. A lot of us are participating online because we've been working for 6 or 7 months now from home. I think it was the guy from Home Depot who said it was his first meeting out in public. And a lot of us have changed our patterns like that. So how much of that will become permanent in terms of the way that we work? I think a lot of us will go back to our offices eventually, but there may be some who never do. They continue to work remotely. And so how does that impact the work of this commission? If we think about not just how freight is moved from a port, whether it's by truck or rail, but where does it get to the end user? Is that if that's at home, like I purchased a pair of tennis shoes during this COVID era, I normally would have driven to a store and tried some shoes on, but I chose to buy them online. And so thanks to Marketplace Facilitator, which is actually my last point, that sales tax dollar is changing where it's being distributed. So the state obviously still gets its portion, but if I'm making my purchase, and I live in Southwest Georgia, if I make my purchase in Americus or Columbus or Albany, then those jurisdictions get that local piece of the sales tax dollar. But thanks to Marketplace Facilitator and the uptick there, if I'm purchasing online and we know that those sales have increased exponentially, it means that the more rural communities are collecting more sales taxes than they would otherwise. And some of these economic centers like Sandersville or Waycross or Dublin are actually collecting less from those outlying areas. So I think all of those things have to be factored in as we consider the remaining work of this committee. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll close.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you for all the work you do representing the port and local government, cities and counties. That concludes our presenters. I want to make just a couple of quick announcements. Number one, our next meeting will be here on November 10th. We'll be talking about heavy infrastructure and investment in heavy infrastructure. Again, all the presentations will be emailed out to you by Chelsea. You already have saved the date in your calendars for November 10th. I also want to publicly, though, take just a moment to thank our staff. They've done a tremendous job. As you can tell, this is a very difficult set of circumstances to have presenters, online members, in-person members, and for it to go as smooth as it has gone. I appreciate, and I won't start naming them, but I'll specifically mention Chelsea and Abby for the job they've done helping keep this thing going forward. So thank you to them. And if you get a chance to personally thank them, I would appreciate it. I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Beach to send us out of here.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to echo and thank staff because I don't have an administrative assistant now. So thank you for what y'all are doing to keep me going forward. Thank y'all for being here. Does anybody in the audience have any comments they'd like to make? We didn't have a sign-up sheet, but if anybody, I always like to go to the audience if you came down here and you want to make a comment or anything. If y'all have any recommendations down the road, please see Chairman Tanner and I, and we're going to be wrapping this thing up 1st of December. So again, thank y'all for being here. I know the circumstances are tough, but thank y'all for taking the time to come. It means a lot to the state for y'all's participation. Thank you very much, and we are adjourned.